Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you, the case of Beatrice Frustieri. Jean-Pierre Faure and Beatrice Frustieri had serious problems in their marriage, which led them to decide that divorce was the only solution. Beatrice admitted that Faure was the only love of her life, and she always believed that would never change. When they first fell in love, they were a happy couple, spending all their free time together. They later had a daughter named Angelica. Beatrice often said that her husband, Faure, was hot-tempered. However, she was an active, lively, and beautiful person. After about 20 years of living together, they understood each other very well. However, their relatives and friends may notice that their relationship is getting worse. Although they stayed together, the mutual understanding they once had was gone. Beatrice often complained about her husband, blamed him for being temperamental, something she loved when she first met her, now becomes a reason why she feels uncomfortable. However, Beatrice is not a perfect person, and this is often mentioned by Faure's family. She was very active, loved to attend parties, and often dressed to show off her beauty. However, Faure and his family believed that she did this not only for herself or for Faure, but also to attract attention from other men. A man named Jean-Claude Dulieri became a close friend of the family. He claimed to have met Faure during their teenage years, and the two had become close friends, growing up in the same neighborhood. The relationship was so close that Faure even got Dulieri a job in his father's company. Before the tragic incident happened, Dulieri was invited to help build a hill in the Faure and Beatrice backyard. During this time, he had a close relationship with their family, visiting them daily and working together. Their friendship grew deeper, and the trio often celebrated holidays and special occasions together. Near the time of Faure and Beatrice's divorce in 2005, he grew closer to them, visiting often, bringing wine with him each time. Faure's daughter, Angelica, noticed that Dulieri was persistently trying to get her father drunk. His behavior was so excessive that she began to suspect he was doing it on purpose, possibly to spend time alone with Beatrice. Her suspicions were not unfounded. Over time, as tensions in the family increased, the situation became worse. Faure eventually discovered that she had been unfaithful to him, prompting him to seek a divorce. During this time, Dulieri quickly became Beatrice's new lover. However, no one was surprised, because she had officially separated from her husband, Faure. Now all that remained was to complete the administrative procedures for their divorce. At this time, Beatrice sought emotional support and received comfort from Dulieri. Meanwhile, Faure seemed to have given up all hope of reconciling with Beatrice or saving their marriage. He became furious, and tensions within the family continued to rise. Besides, Dulieri grew closer to Beatrice as she worked through the divorce proceedings. This situation lasted until the night of March 16, 2005, when Faure suddenly and mysteriously disappeared. 2 days later, Faure's daughter, Angelica, reported him missing to the gendarmerie. She said her father had no intention of going anywhere, especially as her parents were in the midst of a court battle over property division and child custody. Faure rarely left his home, except for work. He was a private person and had no plans to travel far, something Angelica knew very well. Upon receiving the report, detectives began investigating, but he seemed to have disappeared without a trace. A search of the house turned up no clues, making it difficult to determine where to begin the search. The investigators turned their attention to Faure's close circle of acquaintances. Beatrice and Dulieri naturally drew the most scrutiny. During questioning, Beatrice cried frequently, but often gave unclear or rambling answers. Her testimony was often contradictory, but she always insisted that she had nothing to do with her husband Faure's disappearance. Although her behavior aroused the investigators' suspicions, they were unable to extract a confession from her. 2 weeks after Faure went missing, A purchase was made in his name and from his bank account. A car had been purchased and was immediately placed on the wanted list. The vehicle was quickly located using CCTV footage, which revealed it had been driven to Four's residence right after the purchase. The entire building was searched. The car was later found burned out in the basement of the building where Dulieri worked, which was still unfinished. It appears that someone tried to destroy the evidence, but the burning of the car was not entirely successful. Investigators found critical evidence inside the car, including a bloody towel in the trunk. DNA analysis confirmed the blood belonged to Faure. Similar traces were also found inside the car, particularly on the back seat, indicating Faure had been inside the vehicle and seriously injured. Based on the amount of blood found on the towel and in the car, it was likely that Faure had died from his injuries. He had been locked in the trunk of a car that had been purchased under his own name, and with his own money. This discovery led the authorities to launch an official investigation into the possibility that Faure had been kidnapped and murdered. Police also began wiretapping conversations. Beatrice and Dulieri, now not only dating but living together, live in Faure's house. Detectives quickly obtained disturbing audio recordings of their conversations in which they spoke ill of Faure. On April 6, 2005, they were arrested and taken into custody. During a preliminary hearing, Beatrice and Dulieri admitted they had been lovers for a long time, but denied any involvement in the murder. Faure's body has yet to be found, complicating the investigation. During his time in prison, Dulieri wrote letters to the court and investigators, trying to prove his innocence. He claimed to be Beatrice's victim and considered his relationship with her a big mistake. After 10 months in custody, Beatrice was released on bail, but Dulieri remained imprisoned. At that point, the investigation had not yet found any evidence that Beatrice was involved in the murder, and Faure's body had not yet been found. Eventually, she went to the police to reveal what really happened. On November 14, 2007, Beatrice appeared in court. All of her family members were present to support her, especially her daughter Angelica, who appeared very nervous. In court, she revealed that she knew where her husband, Faure, was buried. This revelation shocked his family. She said that she would be willing to show them where he was buried. So the trial was adjourned, so that an investigation could be opened to verify this vital information. Beatrice stood on the rocky ledge of Cap Canaille, surrounded by police. This place is well known in investigative circles for its bad reputation. Several times during the search, bodies were found at the foot of the cliff. This time, the remains were found wearing blue sweatpants, identical to those worn by Faure. Faure's family confirmed that these were his remains and sent them to the forensic laboratory. Unfortunately, the body was too damaged to determine the exact cause of death or the full extent of the injuries. Most of the details of the incident had to be based on Beatrice's account. Curiously, the police discovered the remains of two different people at the foot of the cliff. There were two skulls and several bone fragments scattered nearby. In addition to some pieces of clothing, they also recovered a gold ring, a pair of earrings, and a bracelet. Some of these items were identified as belonging to Faure. While it was initially unclear who the second body belonged to, it was later identified as Dominique Ortiz, a young woman. Her presence at the site was no coincidence. She was the fiancée of Dulieri. She went missing in Marseille in 2001. This raised many doubts about the circumstances of her death and her connection to Faure. Faure's friend Dulieri did not leave a good impression from the start. He was a stern and gruff man. The appearance was compounded by a scar on his face, which he said was from a motorbike accident many years ago. Faure's younger sister filed a police complaint, stating that she suffered daily abuse from her brother. Things got serious when he injured her thigh. During the trial, he denied these allegations, but family and friends described him as a master manipulator. While he appeared pleasant and calm at first, he was in fact controlling, jealous, and aggressive. Of course, when the remains of Dominique and Faure were found to be linked to him, the authorities dismissed the idea that this was just a coincidence. Authorities suspect that Dulieri, a 39-year-old mason from Marseille, killed his fiancée, Dominique, by pushing her off a cliff. He then attacked his friend, Faure, and had planned to dispose of the body in the same location. Prosecutors argued the motive was rooted in jealousy and a love triangle. This prompted him to attack Faure, whom he considered a rival. His main goal is to eliminate Faure, to ensure that the woman he loves, Beatrice, does not have to share her daughter or her fortune with Faure. Beatrice, 41, accused her lover, Dulieri, of a brutal crime. In her account, the incident occurred on the night of the 16th, when she returned home late after an evening shopping trip. Upon entering her home, she was shocked to discover a gruesome scene in the kitchen. This happened just days before her divorce proceedings were set to begin. She said she entered the house and found Dulieri standing over Faure's body, which was lying face down with a fatal head wound, likely from a blow from behind. Beatrice describes Faure as seriously injured and near death. Her lover, Dulieri, was holding a large kitchen knife, typically used for cutting meat. One of the kitchen windows was shattered, with glass shards stained with blood scattered on the floor. She wanted to call for help, but Dulieri stopped her. When she questioned him about what had happened, his behavior was erratic, and he curtly responded that the fewer questions she asked, the fewer problems they would have. During this time, Faure died from his wounds. Beatrice asked Dulieri to call the police and tell them what had happened. However, he then approached her, with a knife in his hand, threatening and looking straight at her. Realizing the danger, she backed away and followed his orders. Then he threw a towel over Faure's head and asked her for help. With no other choice, she was forced to agree to help him dispose of the body. They used a plastic bag to cover Faure's broken head to limit the bleeding. Beatrice explained that the body was dragged to an unfinished building and dumped in the basement, behind stacks of building materials. Terrified and under the threat of death, she felt compelled to comply. Using a newly acquired vehicle, they drove toward Cap Canaille, where they pushed the body off a ledge. She recounted hearing a dull thud as Faure's body struck the rocks below. Then Dulieri approached her, and she thought he was going to push her down too. To her surprise, instead of killing her, he led her to the car. Before letting her in, he violently grabbed her shoulders, shook her angrily, and asked her what she thought about all that had happened. However, Beatrice was too shocked to say anything. She believed that no matter what, she would become Dulieri's next victim. Then he forced her into the car. The entire ride, she was terrified, unsure of where he were going or what would happen to her. To her surprise, they returned to her house. From that moment on, he moved in with her. He kept her under constant surveillance, never allowing her to leave his side. He only allowed her to open the door when he was present, and did not allow her to use her cell phone in private. He even followed her into the bathroom to make sure she did not report it to the authorities. She lived in extreme fear and was unable to help clarify the case. Shortly after moving in, Dulieri disposed of Faure's belongings. He also forced Beatrice to help clean the house of any traces of blood. They cleaned everything together. Beatrice later stated that she had been under immense pressure the entire time, leaving her unable to resist or report the murder to the police. She gradually realized that he was a real monster. All his terrifying aspects were revealed during this time. When Dulieri learned of her confession, he immediately dismissed her account and called her a liar. Even the lawyer representing Faure in the divorce case doubted her testimony. According to lawyer, shortly before his death, Faure had described his wife, Beatrice, as a manipulator and a cheater. He claimed he simply wanted to end their toxic relationship as quickly as possible. The prosecutor's office agreed with this account. They argued that Beatrice was at least an accomplice, or even an active participant in the massacre. During her initial interrogation, she had the opportunity to tell the police what had happened, but she did not. She was clearly unhappy that he wanted to end their relationship and had a motive for the murder. Beatrice's daughter, Angelica, continued to stand by her mother, while Faur's family took a completely different view. The situation had caused family conflict even before the trial began. By the time the hearings started, Angelica and her grandparents were on opposing sides. Both families braced themselves for a confrontation, the outcome of which could determine the freedom of one or both of the criminals, Beatrice and Dulieri. In any case, it took time to verify the new testimony. The hearing resumed on September 15, 2008. By this time, the relationship between the two families had become even more tense and hostile. Angelica's grandparents alleged that Beatrice's lies were the reason Angelica turned against the family. Both Beatrice and Dulieri faced the risk of life imprisonment. The prosecutor's office sought to prove that they were both involved in Faur's murder. Many experts from different fields have been invited to attend this high-level trial in order to clarify the truth. Since the remains could not provide enough information, additional experts were needed to collect as much expert data as possible to help the jury reach a fair and objective conclusion. Forensic psychiatrists analyzed Beatrice and Dulieri's psychological profiles, which cast further doubt on Beatrice's story. Compared to Dulieri, she seemed unusually anxious. They repeatedly blamed each other and accused each other of lying. Dulieri even argued that the body found was not Faur's. However, this claim was invalidated, as DNA testing confirmed that the remains were indeed Faur's. During the hearing, a forensic expert testified, aiming to clarify key questions. Expert identified 3 serious injuries to Faur's skull, located on the back of the head and the crown. The force and placement of these injuries aligned with Beatrice's account of incident. According to the expert, the attacker struck Faur from behind, delivering multiple powerful blows and killing him. These details seem to fit Dulieri, who was physically weaker than Faur. Not having the strength to face him directly, Dulieri took the opportunity to attack from behind. To support the expert's argument, the prosecution presented Faur's skull and some of his bones. They showed signs of trauma and even saw cuts on the bones. For the Faur family, this presentation was very painful, but it was considered necessary for the case. In addition, the prosecutor's office used another skeleton because they were investigating the possibility that Dulieri was involved in the murder of Dominique, who was found near Faur's body. All of the above evidence was carefully arranged and labeled in boxes, then brought to the hearing. After the hearings, it was discovered that Dominique's father had been trying for a long time to retrieve his daughter's body and bury her. However, he was unable to do so because law enforcement agencies had difficulty completing the relevant procedures. At the same time, her remains had been examined by forensic experts for a long time in the laboratory. This was the greatest pain for him, causing him to be angry and curse Dulieri. When both sides presented their arguments, the prosecutor requested a 20-year sentence for Beatrice and a 30-year sentence for Dulieri. While the jury deliberated, the media interviewed Dulieri, who maintained his innocence and expressed a desire for the ordeal to end quickly. He claimed that he had been wrongly imprisoned for 3.5 years and did not want to spend the next years of his life in prison. Despite his hopes, the jury found Dulieri guilty. The court sentenced the defendants to the exact terms requested by the prosecutor: 20 years for Beatrice and 30 years for Dulieri. Faur's family was largely satisfied with the verdict, but they argued that she deserved a harsher punishment, as they believed she had not only been involved in cleaning up the crime scene, but had played a much more significant role in the massacre. In their view, she also deserved a 30-year sentence. However, Beatrice's parents and daughter strongly opposed this. While in prison, Beatrice filed an appeal and placed high hopes on her lawyer. On the morning before the hearing, her lawyer continued to speak to the media, expressing confidence that they could win the appeal, especially since the case had attracted so much public attention. Finally, Beatrice was in the courtroom with Dulieri. From the outset, her behavior did not work in her favor. She arrived wearing an overly flashy outfit, with bright makeup and a festive hairstyle, as if preparing for a celebration rather than attending a court hearing about her spouse's death. Typically, defendants often choose simple clothing to avoid being negatively evaluated by the jury. However, she made it seem like this was a happy occasion. The defense focused on emphasizing that the prosecution's allegations lacked direct evidence. Even the forensic team had difficulty identifying Faury's body, let alone reconstructing the incident leading up to the death. The prosecutor, however, focused on Beatrice's own account of incident. As in previous hearings, Beatrice's daughter, Angelica, was there to support her mother. All her efforts are focused on rescuing her mother from prison. By this point, the prosecution had obtained recordings of phone conversations between Beatrice and Dulieri, made just 3 weeks after Faur's death. These recordings were played in court. The recording contradicts Beatrice's testimony that she was threatened by Dulieri. In fact, she appeared to be a manipulator. Beatrice's daughter, Angelica, has come to her mother's defense, claiming that her mother's was not cruel or manipulative. She claims that her mother was abused by Dulieri, which proves that she could not have been complicit in the crime. According to Angelica, her mother's fell into a state of depression and fear, was forced by Dulieri to help hide the body and the evidence. During the hearings, Beatrice's former boss also testified. He denied having had an extramarital affair with her. However, he spoke highly of Beatrice, describing her as a reliable and professional employee. According to him, Beatrice was not manipulative, but rather gentle and never cruel. Later, Beatrice herself took the stand, offering lengthy and convoluted explanations filled with irrelevant details. A forensic psychiatrist analyzed her behavior, describing her as a frightened and desperate woman. She tried vehemently to defend herself, accusing everyone, including Faur's relatives, of neglecting him for years. She claimed that no one loved him as she did. This accusation outraged his family, who saw it as offensive. His mother calls her a bad person, willing to put others down just to avoid jail. The bitter confrontation between Beatrice and his family only adds to the tension. Faur's father, Robert, accused Beatrice of orchestrating the murder. He claimed that forensic evidence showed his son had put up a strong fight against his attackers. Robert firmly believed that Dulieri alone was not strong enough to overpower Faur, which clearly pointed to both perpetrators working together to commit the crime. Meanwhile, his mother highlighted Beatrice's supposed immoral behavior to the jury. Her remarks were so harsh that Angelica, Beatrice's daughter, lost her temper. Angelica's behavior became so outrageous that she was warned that she could be removed from the courtroom. Angelica also blamed Dulieri for manipulating her mother. Dulieri, however, claimed that Beatrice had manipulated him, leading him astray, and ultimately ensuring he ended up in prison for 30 years. Yet, his claim was not taken seriously, as the prosecutor's office was fully convinced that both Dulieri and Beatrice had acted together in committing the crime. The prosecutor then presented a crucial piece of evidence. According to them, Beatrice had conspired to murder. This was evidenced by the purchase of a new car, supposedly purchased by Faur, but in reality, Beatrice is the buyer. The car was said to have been purchased in advance to facilitate the disposal of the body. With the new evidence, prosecutors have asked for Beatrice's sentence to be extended, However, her lawyer argued that she had purchased the car under duress from Dulieri, who had been planning to kill Faure for some time out of jealousy. In her final statement, Beatrice maintained her innocence. She denied any involvement in Faure's murder, stating that despite their conflicts, she had no motive to kill him. The trial lasted 3 days. After all testimonies and arguments were presented, the chief prosecutor requested a 30 years prison sentence for both Beatrice Frustieri and Jean-Claude Dulieri. The jury deliberated for over 4 hours before returning to the courtroom to deliver their verdict. They upheld Beatrice's 20 years sentence, reaffirming her guilt. The family Faure was disappointed once again, as they had hoped for a harsher punishment. Dulieri's sentence was also reviewed, though less extensively. His prison term was reduced by 5 years, despite objections from Faure's family. For the Dominique Ortiz case, Dulieri received a 20 years prison sentence, to run concurrently with his other sentence. Beatrice and Dulieri were sent back to prison, but the exact roles they played in the crimes remain a subject of controversy. Welcome back, detectives. Let's dive into another horrible case. The case of Kelsey Turner. Kelsey Turner was born on March 5, 1993, in Norfolk, Virginia, the second child of Samantha Ingram, who aspired to be a model and dancer. Growing up, Kelsey had an older brother named Colin. After her birth, her family moved to Jonesboro, Arkansas, a small industrial town where Kelsey spent most of her childhood. However, her family life was turned upside down when her parents divorced after a few years. After the divorce, her father returned to Virginia. Kelsey grew up into a beautiful young woman with a perfect figure and attractive features that could easily lead to a modeling career. However, she found school unappealing and enjoyed socializing with friends, dating, and attending various social events. Her ultimate ambition was to become famous, appearing on magazine covers, giving interviews, and walking the red carpet at major events. Despite her ambition, Kelsey had no real talent and had to rely on her youth and looks to survive. While in high school, she began attending modeling auditions in hopes of starting a career. Her mother, Samantha, who dreamed of becoming a model, was happy to support her daughter in pursuing her dream. Unfortunately, Kelsey's modeling career was limited to a few small photo shoots for clothing catalogs. Kelsey married Jerry Turner at the age of 18, when she was already pregnant. Their daughter, Beverly, was born shortly after the wedding. However, the marriage did not last long and ended in divorce. By the age of 20, after giving up her modeling career, Kelsey decided to pursue a career as a men's magazine model. She quickly caught the attention of several men's magazines. Kelsey saw this as the beginning of a great career and a ticket to the life she had always dreamed of. Kelsey has received several modeling offers and opportunities over the years, including photo shoots for popular publications such as Playboy and Maxim, as well as a photo shoot with 110 magazine. She frequently travels to major cities such as Los Angeles and Las Vegas to pursue these opportunities. In an interview, Kelsey describes herself as a curvaceous blonde with a slim waist and reflects her carefree personality, saying that she likes to have fun, party with her friends, and live life to the fullest. Kelsey is not overly concerned about the future. She frequently changes partners and quickly spends any money she earns or receives from fans. At 23, Kelsey became pregnant again and gave birth to a son, Josh. The father of the child did not want to marry her or acknowledge his child. As the modeling offers dried up, Kelsey turned to social media to build an audience. She actively manages her accounts, posting revealing photos in swimsuits, lingerie, or only partially covering her private parts. Kelsey has cultivated the perfect online image. Her carefully edited photos make her look beautiful, and her social media pages showcase her visits to high-end fashion stores, trendy nightclubs, and other locations. However, this ideal online image hid the true struggles of a single mother of two. Despite her wealthy appearance, her real life was difficult, as she was a poor money manager, often spending all her income at once. Around 2016, Kelsey faced serious problems after an unfortunate incident with her daughter. The girl suffered a severe trauma that left her daughter withdrawn and unable to speak. An acquaintance advised her to take her daughter to a psychiatrist. So she contacted renowned pediatric psychiatrist Dr. Thomas Burchard, who practiced in Monterey, California, to treat her daughter. Dr. Thomas Burchard is a highly respected pediatric psychiatrist who was born on February 16, 1948, in Boston, Massachusetts. He is the son of a prominent architect and engineer, and his family later moved to Virginia. Although his father taught architecture at prestigious institutions, including Harvard, Thomas chose a different path and pursued a medical career, focusing on child psychology. After completing medical school, Dr. Thomas served as a resident in pediatric psychiatry at several leading hospitals and taught at universities across the country. He eventually settled at a public clinical hospital on California's Monterey Peninsula, where he spent more than 40 years as a pediatric psychiatrist, building an impeccable reputation for his exceptional ability to connect with young patients and handle even the most complex and severe cases. He earned his doctorate from the University of California, Berkeley. Thomas was known for being kind, sharp, and incredibly generous. His compassionate nature motivated him to help those in need, especially young patients whose parents could not afford therapy. He also paid for hospital treatment for sick children from low-income families and supported single mothers. Dr. Thomas had a longtime companion named Di, who served as an assistant, housekeeper, and possibly more. As someone who knew him well, she was the first to notice changes in his behavior that showed early signs of dementia or Alzheimer's. As Dr. Thomas entered his 70s, he became increasingly forgetful, absent-minded, and distracted. To hide these symptoms from his colleagues, he kept detailed diaries and notebooks to record important information, such as names, dates, and events. He always carried a notebook in his breast pocket that contained sensitive information such as bank information, account numbers, passwords, and card PINs. When Kelsey first visited Dr. Thomas with her daughter, she expressed her difficulties as a single mother and her inability to afford his services. However, the doctor offered to provide his services for free and went on to give Kelsey $300 to help support her children. Kelsey was shocked but quickly discovered that by sharing tearful stories of her difficult life, she could extort more money from the elderly doctor. Kelsey prepared a detailed plan for her next appointment with Dr. Thomas. During the visit, she told a heartbreaking story about her youngest son's illness and lack of money to buy expensive medicine for him. She gave a specific amount of money that she needed, and surprisingly, she received the entire amount from Dr. Thomas. Kelsey continued to make up false, tearful stories in the following visits. She would make up stories of hardship and receive larger and larger amounts of money from this trustworthy doctor. Of course, she did not use the money for her children but for her own entertainment, designer clothes. Not wanting to return to her hometown of Virginia, Kelsey asked Thomas to pay for her rent in California, saying that she could find work there more easily and that the climate there was better for her children. Thomas agreed and paid for the apartment she had chosen. Some people suspected that the doctor had an affair with Kelsey, a young blonde model, and that was why he always indulged her requests. However, Kelsey claimed that Thomas treated her and her children like family and acted out of kindness, not love. Thomas provided Kelsey and her children with a home, paid their bills, and gave them a large sum of money for their necessities. He also leased her a luxury Mercedes-Benz convertible. Over time, Kelsey realized that her modeling career was over and her youth was slipping away. Despite this, she made no effort to find another job and instead relied on Dr. Thomas for financial support. During this time, he spent about $500,000 on Kelsey and her children. However, she squandered that money on personal indulgences, such as breast augmentation and liposuction, in hopes of reviving her modeling career. Kelsey's excessive spending and partying lifestyle led to her neglecting her children. This eventually led to her ex-husband, who had won sole custody of their daughter through the courts, stripping Kelsey of her parental rights. As a result, Kelsey was left with only her youngest son. Thomas was furious when he discovered the situation, but his anger was directed at Kelsey, not at her ex-husband. It was clear that Kelsey had neglected her children and was using the money meant for their care to support her lavish lifestyle. Dr. Thomas decided to address the issue with Kelsey, informing her that he would no longer support her lavish and idle lifestyle. However, Kelsey responded by threatening to spread false rumors that Dr. Thomas had inappropriate feelings for his young patients. Although he knew this was a lie, Dr. Thomas realized that any further rumors about the matter could seriously damage his reputation as a respected pediatric psychiatrist and scholar. Faced with this threat, Dr. Burchard reluctantly gave in to Kelsey's demands and continued to support her financially. In 2019, Kelsey moved to Las Vegas with her son to try to revive her modeling career, and she expected Thomas, whom she was blackmailing, to fund the effort. As instructed, Thomas rented a house for her and provided the requested funds. However, after receiving the financial support, Kelsey disappeared for 2 months and her whereabouts were unknown. Later that year, in February, Kelsey reappeared, contacting Thomas in an emotional state, saying that she was seriously ill, unable to work, and in dire financial straits. When Thomas refused to help, Kelsey's attitude changed completely and she continued to threaten and blackmail him. Judy, who was close to Thomas, advised him to report Kelsey's behavior to the police and contact Child Protective Services, due to concerns about Kelsey's ability to care for her younger son, especially since she had previously lost parental rights to her older daughter. Dr. Thomas took steps to prepare in case the conflict with Kelsey escalated in court. He informed his colleagues of the situation, and they agreed to support him. Judy had previously attempted to resolve the issue by speaking directly with Kelsey. Unfortunately, her efforts only resulted in Kelsey threatening retaliation. Thomas decided to travel to Las Vegas to verify Kelsey's claims. Judy tried to dissuade Thomas, but he was adamant about traveling to Las Vegas to meet with Kelsey. Judy also offered to accompany him as a friend for support, but Dr. Thomas insisted on handling the matter himself. He finally set off on March 1, 2019. On the morning of March 7th, a group of tourists got lost while traveling through Nevada. While trying to get to Lake Mead, they took a dirt road off the main highway. They came across a Mercedes-Benz convertible parked in the desert. The roof was closed and the windows were rolled up, but unusually, there was no one around the car. Intrigued, the tourists cautiously approached the car and saw that one of the windows was broken. Upon further investigation, they looked inside and saw signs of a struggle. There were blood stains all over the interior. The tourists quickly contacted the police to report their shocking discovery. Police arrived at the scene around noon and discovered an unbearable stench. The source of the smell was quickly identified when police opened the trunk. Inside, they found the body of an elderly man hidden under a pile of furniture and rags. Beside him was a blood-stained baseball bat. The victim was later identified as Dr. Thomas, who had been missing for 5 days. Judy reported Dr. Thomas missing on March 2nd when she was unable to reach him at their scheduled meeting time. She immediately suspected something terrible had happened and contacted the police, hoping he would be found alive. The autopsy revealed numerous serious injuries to Thomas's body. These included scratches, bruises, and superficial cuts, as well as a severe head injury that may have been caused by a baseball bat found in the trunk of the car next to him. Part of his ear was severed, and his hands had multiple cuts that suggested a desperate attempt to defend himself. Thomas's face also had noticeable bruises with a unique printed pattern. Most shocking was the evidence that the man had been placed in the trunk of the car while still alive and injured, eventually suffocating from the intense desert heat. The investigation focused on Kelsey Turner as the prime suspect, as the car at the crime scene had been rented under her name. Judy had provided the police with Kelsey's address, which matched the location Dr. Thomas had visited. However, when the police arrived at the scene, they found the house empty. Although no one was there, the house showed signs of a hasty cleanup. Containers of cleaning products were scattered throughout the house, and the air smelled strongly of household chemicals, suggesting that someone had tried to erase any evidence of the crime. The house was occupied by Kelsey, her 4-year-old son, and her new boyfriend, John Logan Kennison, along with 2 neighbors, Diana Pina and Jeremy Eric. All had fled, making them suspects, as Kelsey could not have inflicted such injuries on the doctor or placed his body in the trunk of her car herself. Jeremy Eric was the only person the police interviewed. He explained that he and his girlfriend had left Kelsey's house while the doctor was still alive. According to Jeremy, his girlfriend had been drinking heavily and began flirting with Thomas, trying to extort money from him, similar to Kelsey's tactics. This made Kelsey extremely angry, as she accused Jeremy's girlfriend of trying to steal Thomas from her. The situation became worse, and Jeremy had to quickly move his girlfriend out of the house to avoid a fight. He did not return for several days and was unaware of what had happened after he left. During the investigation, the police learned from Judy that Dr. Thomas kept a notebook with his bank account information and passwords, which he frequently lost. When they searched, they discovered that the notebook was missing. Furthermore, 2 of Dr. Thomas's accounts showed significant withdrawals on March 3rd, after which Thomas's accounts and cards were immediately closed. On March 21st, in Stockton, California, police arrested Kelsey and her boyfriend for attempting to withdraw money again. It was later discovered that the couple had stayed in various motels with a child, paid in cash, and moved frequently. They initially attempted to drain all of Thomas's accounts but were unsuccessful. They then attempted to withdraw more money with the intention of fleeing to Mexico but were prevented by the accounts being closed. Diana, a neighbor who was at Kelsey's home that night, cooperated with police and shared her account of what happened on the night of March 7th. According to her, the trouble began after Jeremy and his girlfriend left. Kelsey had a heated argument with Dr. Thomas, who refused to give her money. Kelsey threatened to ruin the doctor's reputation by spreading rumors about his misconduct with young patients. As the argument escalated, Kelsey became aggressive. Dr. Thomas, feeling threatened, locked himself in his room. However, John broke the door open with a strong shoulder thrust and then hit Thomas hard with a baseball bat. This caused a serious injury, resulting in a large hematoma and a nosebleed. Diana rushed in, pleading with everyone to calm down. Seeing Thomas's condition, she urged them to take him to the hospital, fearing the consequences of their actions. After hearing Thomas say that he would tell the police that he had been attacked and robbed by strangers, the 4 drove to the garage. Diana was ordered by Kelsey to return to the house and clean up, removing all traces of blood. Diana followed the instructions and began cleaning, but soon heard screams and a struggle coming from the garage. She rushed back to find the couple brutally attacking Dr. Thomas in the car. The doctor was trapped and unable to escape or defend himself. It became clear that Kelsey and John had no intention of taking Thomas to the hospital. Instead, they planned to kill him with a baseball bat, a small knife, and John's empty pistol, leaving bruises on the doctor's face. Diana was instructed to return to the house and continue cleaning. Fearing for her safety, she complied and left the garage. While Diana was still cleaning, she heard the couple's car drive away. Several hours later, John's car returned with Kelsey, but the other car, a convertible, was nowhere to be seen. Diana remained unaware of the convertible's location until she heard about a car found in the desert with a body in the trunk. Diana chose to cooperate with the police from the start by agreeing to a plea deal and sharing all relevant information she knew. This decision resulted in a reduced sentence for tampering with evidence, serving just 3 years in prison. John Logan Kennison was convicted of murder and sentenced to 45 years in prison with the possibility of parole after 18 years. Kelsey Turner's trial was more complicated. After her arrest, she announced that she was pregnant, causing significant delays in the trial. While in custody, she gave birth to a baby girl who, along with her son, was placed under the protection of social services, as none of Kelsey's relatives were willing to take on the responsibility. Kelsey Turner was sentenced to 25 years in prison in January 2023, with the possibility of parole after serving at least 10 years. She is currently serving her sentence at the Florence McClure Correctional Center for Women in Las Vegas. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Sandra Miles. Sandra was born on May 26, 1949, in the small, cozy town of Harn, Kansas, USA. She had a close relationship with her sister. They attended the same school, walked together, and spent time with their family. After graduating from high school, Sandra focused on starting a family. She was in a serious relationship with her boyfriend, and they decided to get married. They welcomed a son named Chad. Unfortunately, the marriage did not work out. Sandra quickly realized that her husband was not the right match for her. After the divorce, Sandra found another partner, but that relationship also ended in disappointment, leading her to break up with him as well. In 1976, Sandra, a single mother, got a job at a factory that made pumps and pistons for industrial machinery. This job required her family to relocate to a larger city, Hutchinson. In her new position, Sandra proved herself and gained the respect of management through her hard work and responsibility. She performed her tasks exceptionally well. It was during this time that she met her third husband, Jerry Miles. They were instantly attracted to each other, and their friendship quickly blossomed into romance, leading to their decision to marry. Their marriage happened rapidly, but it was evident that Jerry and Sandra truly loved each other and were eager to get married. A year later, Sandra was expecting a baby with her new husband. In September of that year, they welcomed their daughter, Tracy, who brought immense joy to her parents, especially Sandra, who had always dreamed of having a large family. During this time, their marriage appeared to be perfect. The couple had a strong bond and prioritized their family above all else. Jerry's children regularly communicated with him and participated in family events. He particularly enjoyed spending time with Tracy at the nearby lake. To outsiders, their marriage appeared perfect. However, only close friends and family knew of the underlying issue. After 7 years of marriage, Sandra could no longer endure her husband's alcoholism. This revelation shocked many, as she had previously concealed the problem. Sandra ultimately chose to end her marriage to her third husband, Jerry, and raise their children by herself. She thought Jerry was a kind man when he was sober, but he had difficulty managing his drinking. When he drank, he became a completely different person. At first, he was able to control his drinking, but over time, his alcoholism became more and more evident. His relapses became more frequent, placing a heavy burden on Sandra. She worked every day at the factory to support the family and eventually became exhausted from the thing. Sandra always saw Jerry as a wonderful husband and father. Their relationship ended because he struggled with alcohol addiction. Even so, she continued to support their children while maintaining her job. This was a challenging time for her, but she was determined not to give up and managed to handle the difficulties well. Jerry offered some help, but when he succumbed to alcohol again, Sandra had to face all the challenges alone. Despite this, she stayed confident in her abilities and was driven to ensure her children had a bright future and everything they needed for a fulfilling life. It was certainly challenging, but Sandra Miles was not one to give up easily. She remained a conscientious mother, spending all her free time with her children. Despite facing difficulties, she handled them with grace, which brought her closer to her daughter Tracy during this time. Her son had grown up, moved out, and started his own life, but Tracy continues to support her mother because she realizes that Sandra's efforts are mainly to benefit her. In the spring of 1997, Sandra's relationship with Tracy, her 16-year-old daughter, began to deteriorate. Tracy has started dating her first boyfriend and is going through the rebellious phase that is common in adolescence. Sandra tried to improve their relationship. She thought her daughter's problems were only temporary. At the same time, Sandra was mindful of her own past failed marriages and felt the need to caution Tracy about the mistakes she made in her youth. Tracy's affection for her mother faded quickly, leading to a strained relationship between them. To win her daughter's love, Sandra bought Tracy a Black Moon car, which Tracy had longed for. This gift excited Tracy. She adored her car and made a point to arrive first at school every day so everyone would notice it. It seemed like Tracy had a bright future ahead, and she represented hope for Sandra. Sandra was determined to do whatever it took to help her daughter succeed. However, fate can be cruel. On March 20th, Sandra's son Chad and his girlfriend Mindy visited her with exciting news. Mindy was pregnant. Sandra was thrilled at the prospect of becoming a grandmother and eagerly anticipated the birth of her grandson. Unfortunately, Sandra would not live to see that moment. While Sandra's sister, Pat Douglas Butler, was having breakfast with her husband, she received an urgent call from Sandra's workplace. Sandra's employer reported that Sandra had been absent for 5 days. Concerned for her well-being, the boss tried to contact her but was unable to reach her. Pat also hadn't heard from her during this time, as they didn't typically call each other every day. Worried, Pat and her husband decided to visit Sandra's house to check if she was okay or if she needed help. When Pat and her husband arrived, they found the door locked and the house appeared deserted. This was strange because Sandra lived there with her daughter, Tracy, who was usually very active and should have been home at that time. Then, Pat and her husband went to the school to look for Tracy. The teachers were confused as Tracy had also been absent for several days. The class teacher, Noni, tried to call the family, but no one answered. Alarmed by the situation, Pat decided to call the police to report the disappearance of both Sandra and Tracy. The officers took Pat's statement and assessed the situation. When they arrived, Pat was waiting for them and handed over a spare key to the front door that she had kept. Law enforcement officers entered the house and immediately detected a strong, unpleasant smell of decomposition, unmistakable in nature. The experienced patrol officers recognized the importance of preserving the crime scene to protect the evidence, so they called for backup. When additional police officers arrived, they discovered the decomposed body of a woman lying on her bed, covered with a blanket. Upon removing the blanket, they found a power cord from a household appliance wrapped around her neck, indicating she likely died from strangulation. Additionally, there were multiple injuries visible on her face and head. Due to the severe level of decomposition, the victim's identity could not be immediately determined. It was unclear how many blows she had suffered or what exactly was hit with, but it was clear that her death was not natural, it was a murder. A forensic medical examination was needed to understand the details surrounding her death. However, dental records confirmed that the body belonged to Sandra Miles. Besides, they could not find Tracy in the house, indicating that she was missing. At first, detectives thought Tracy might also be a victim of the same attacker. They searched the house thoroughly, but found no evidence suggesting she had been harmed like her mother. It was possible that Tracy had been kidnapped, placing her in great danger and requiring immediate action. She was added to the missing persons list, and the search for her began. It was unclear who would wish harm on Sandra, a woman who devoted her life to creating a future for her children. When Detective Hutchinson began investigating the case, they considered every possibility, including neighbors and her ex-husband. The aim was to uncover who had a motive for the murder of 48-year-old Sandra Miles and the disappearance of Tracy. Sandra's family, sister, son, and ex-husband were quickly informed of the tragic news. All were in shock. Sandra seemed to have no enemies and was known as a kind and gentle person who worked hard to overcome life's difficulty and support her daughter. It was hard to believe anyone could be so cruel to someone defenseless. Tracy's brother, Chad, made an appeal through the newspaper, asking locals to help find Tracy, his only surviving family member who had been taken from him. Forensic experts have revealed harrowing details of Sandra's last moments. Sandra had been knocked to the ground by repeated blows to her head with a blunt object. While she was incapacitated, a power cord was used to strangle her. The presence of large bruises and internal bleeding indicated she endured a prolonged and violent assault. The medical examiner believed there were likely at least 2 attackers. Investigators suggested that the incident was a robbery gone wrong, possibly triggered when Sandra confronted the intruders as they attempted to steal from her home. Sandra might have seen them, then a fight broke out, and they murdered her because they were afraid she would report to the police. However, after inspecting the crime scene, detectives found this scenario unlikely. There were no signs of a break-in, and the house lost nothing, except Tracy's favorite car. It didn't make sense to commit murder for the sake of theft. The brutality of Sandra's injuries was notable. An ordinary robber wouldn't have wasted time with strangulation, they would have shot her to avoid confrontation. The severe damage to her upper body indicated that the injuries were not a result of panic from being caught, but rather a deliberate attack meant to kill. This level of cruelty suggested a culmination of a long-standing feud. Another possibility considered was that of a maniacal attacker, but generally, such individuals act alone. This crime, however, was clearly carried out by multiple people given the severity of the injuries. Now, the killers had taken Tracy captive, making it urgent to locate the criminals. The detectives believed that Sandra had willingly let her attackers into the house, as there were no signs of forced entry. Therefore, they recognized the need to continue the investigation. The police contacted all of Sandra's relatives, friends, neighbors, and co-workers as part of their investigation. The police focused particularly on her ex-husbands, as they might have motives rooted in resentment. Sandra's third husband, Jerry, who struggled with alcoholism, drew significant attention. He may have been unhappy after the divorce, and the detective speculated that he could have confronted Sandra while intoxicated, possibly leading to her death. However, the detectives to find that he had an alibi, so he was removed from the list of suspects. Police interviewed all of Sandra's acquaintances to identify suspects in the violent massacre and possibly Tracy's kidnapping. Sandra's sister, Pat, informed detectives that she last saw Sandra alive 5 days earlier. On that day, she received a work call around the same time Tracy visited the school where she studied, making it a key date in the investigation. Efforts to gather information from friends and acquaintances were unproductive. So detectives turned to the neighbors. They discovered that the neighborhood was peaceful and close-knit, where everyone was familiar with one another. The next day, news of the incident at Sandra's house spread quickly. A crowd gathered in the yard and driveway, prompting the police to restrict access to the area. Many neighbors stopped by out of curiosity, anxious to learn what had happened. There was a growing concern in everyone, as they realized a dangerous killer, and possibly a kidnapper, was still at large, especially since there had been no word from Tracy. Fortunately, some witnesses in the crowd provided valuable information to the detectives. A neighbor who lived directly across the street reported seeing Tracy about 5 days earlier, on March 25th. He had noticed her with 2 young men. They all got into one of the guy's cars and drove away, and he never saw them again. This account raised questions about the nature of Tracy's disappearance, as it didn't fit the typical scenario of a schoolgirl being kidnapped. The friends, identified as Mark and Jay, lived nearby, so the detectives decided to interview them at their homes. Mark quickly left as several police officers spotted a red car in the distance. When Mark noticed the police approaching, he sped away and vanished at high speed. This behavior seemed suspicious, so one of the detectives alerted the patrol nearby about his direction. Mark wouldn't have fled so rapidly if he weren't trying to hide something from the police. Luckily, it didn't take long for them to catch up. Mark was eventually stopped just a few kilometers from his home. Mark was driving his car with a friend who was anxious about the recent tragedy at Sandra's house. The 2 young men attempted to convince the police that their fear was the only reason for their unusual behavior, but seasoned detectives sensed they were hiding something. Consequently, both were taken to the police station for questioning. During the interrogation, the young men insisted they were merely frightened by the news of the incident at the Miles residence. Their stories closely matched, but the police found no solid evidence against them, so they were released. However, they became important witnesses because the police were aware that Tracy had recently been in a relationship with a young man named Jeremy Bell. They also knew that Sandra disapproved of him, believing he would have a negative impact on her daughter's life. Eventually, Tracy broke up with Jeremy and started dating Paul Nelson. Several witnesses stated that shortly before the tragedy, Tracy had a significant argument with her mother over Jeremy and Paul, both of whom Sandra disapproved. Detectives began interviewing numerous teenagers connected to this group. It was established that Tracy's ex, Jeremy, had a volatile temperament and had even made threats against Paul. However, Paul was not the main reason for Tracy and Jeremy's breakup. That was largely due to Sandra's disapproval, which may have prompted Jeremy's hostility toward her. In fact, the relationship between Sandra and Jeremy was extremely strained. Sandra had to go to the police station to obtain a restraining order against Jeremy. He accused her of ruining his relationship with her daughter, Tracy, and threatened her, although he never acted on these threats. During drunken parties, he often expressed how much Sandra bothered him to his friends. Sandra was determined to protect her daughter from him, which only led to more conflicts. It was known that Jeremy was already on the police's radar due to his numerous violations, and the restraining order worsened the situation. He clearly held a grudge against Sandra, which raised concerns that he could have kidnapped Tracy. At this point, detectives believed that Jeremy had killed Sandra and was now holding Tracy captive. They decided to question Jeremy, who, along with his friend William Lennon, had been arrested for burglary on the 1st of the month, just a few days before Sandra's murder. Since Jeremy was in prison during the time of the murder, he could not have been involved in Sandra's death. The fate of Tracy remained uncertain. The kidnapper had not made any demands, leading the police to fear that she might already be dead, although there was still a chance she was being held hostage. Time was of the essence for her safety. When investigators spoke with Jeremy in prison, he explained that he was not in a relationship with Tracy at the time of Sandra's murder due to a restraining order that required him to avoid contact with her. As a result, they broke up. During this time, Tracy began dating another man, Paul Nelson, which led Jeremy to distance himself from her. The police noticed that Jeremy appeared to strongly dislike Paul and openly expressed a desire to confront. Jeremy accused Paul of encouraging Tracy to engage in criminal behavior and worried that she might become involved with drugs because of her relationship with him. However, he stated that he did not harbor any ill feelings toward Sandra. In fact, their communication improved once Tracy started dating Paul. As Sandra shifted her anger towards Paul, Jeremy supported Sandra during this time. On March 25th, just before Sandra's murder, Jeremy warned Tracy about her new boyfriend, Paul, whom he considered dangerous. By that time, the autopsy results were complete. The medical examiner determined that Sandra died on March 26 from 4 stab wounds and significant blunt force trauma to the head. These injuries were confirmed as the cause of death, and strangulation was also used to ensure she was dead. The police needed to locate Paul Nelson, the main suspect, to question him. However, he was missing. His parents reported that he hadn't been seen since March 26. Like Tracy, detectives believed he was involved in Sandra's murder. They needed to find him and uncover what happened to Tracy, but they could only address that after detaining he. Investigators discovered that Paul had been in regular contact with his friend Zwickle, with whom he had lived before going into hiding. When detectives spoke with Zwickle, he provided valuable information. He confirmed that Sandra did not approve of the relationship between Tracy and Paul. Sandra believed that Paul, Tracy's new boyfriend, was a bad influence and was trying to get her involved with drugs. Despite Sandra's objections, Tracy and Paul continued to meet secretly. After several weeks, Sandra found out about it and was upset. She told her daughter that getting involved with a drug addict was a big mistake. Despite this, she refused to face the truth. Her mother urged her to end the relationship with Paul. Sandra then informed Tracy that if she wanted a family and children, she would need to move in with Paul. This news surprised both Tracy and Paul, as they had nowhere to live. Sandra advised Tracy to think about ending her pregnancy, and Tracy consented. However, their relationship worsened after the abortion. A shocking moment for Tracy was when Sandra threatened to take her car keys if she didn't end her relationship with Paul. This tension may have led Paul to develop a grudge against Sandra, who he and Tracy saw as an obstacle to their relationship. Paul's friend, Zwickle, reported that on March 26, Paul returned home around 10 a.m. and immediately began packing his belongings. Paul mentioned that he was planning to leave with Tracy and that they had $2,000, which he believed would be sufficient for their escape. Paul confided in Zwickle that he and Tracy intended to run away in her car, and Zwickle assumed they were fleeing due to a disagreement. However, Paul did not mention Sandra's death to Zwickle. When Zwickle inquired about how Paul obtained the money, he claimed he had sold Sandra's tape recorder to a pawn shop. It was later discovered that tape recorder had indeed gone missing from the house after the attack. In reality, Paul was not being truthful. Selling tape recorder only netted him less than $50. It remained unclear how Paul could have acquired such a significant amount of money at that time. Afterwards, Zwickle noticed how Paul and Tracy got into a car and drove away without any signs of stress. It seemed they were heading to Mexico. Given the situation, Zwickle began to suspect that Paul might be involved in a murder. As a result, Paul and Tracy were placed on a nationwide wanted list. Investigators in Kansas identified 18-year-old Paul Nelson as the prime suspect. The police were particularly troubled by the $2,000 Paul had, which he used to flee. They wondered if he had robbed someone or committed another crime. Investigators were shocked and they examined Sandra's bank accounts. On March 26, her daughter, Tracy, withdrew money from her mother's account. While looking into this, detectives discovered that Tracy had gone to the bank with Paul and cashed a check with the teller. Tracy claimed that her mother had given her the money to buy a new car. This raised serious suspicions about her actions. A bank employee reported that Tracy and Paul were calm during the transaction and showed no signs of worry. Amid suspicions that Tracy may have been a hostage in a kidnapping, police now have new suspicions. It seemed Paul's friend, Zwickel, was telling the truth. Could Tracy actually be a willing participant in the crime instead of a hostage? To investigate further, they reached out to Tracy's best friend, Candace Keno. Candace revealed that on March 25th, Tracy had called her to share that a serious conflict had erupted with her mother. Tracy's mother had taken the car key away from her and threatened to kick her out. This created evident hostility between them. Candace mentioned that following this incident, Tracy decided to run away with Paul and admitted this during their phone conversation. The officers' doubts were confirmed. It became clear that from the very beginning, no one had actually tried to keep Tracy as a hostage. The police confirmed that Tracy and Paul had crossed the border into Mexico and subsequently got lost. After some time, a United States Border Service officer informed the police that Tracy and Paul had re-entered the U.S. near El Paso. The reason for their return was unclear, but it was evident that they were in trouble. Efforts to locate the couple intensified. On April 8, Candace contacted investigators to report that she had spoken with Tracy on the phone. Candace provided the police with Tracy's phone number. Tracy and Paul was located on the outskirts of El Paso, and later, that day, investigators apprehended Paul. Candace agreed to make another call to help detectives pinpoint the location from which Tracy had called. Tracy and Paul was arrested and taken to the police station for questioning. Paul did not appear to be a dangerous gangster. He kept his eyes on the floor and trembled with fear. He explained the details of the attack, admitting that on the evening of the 25th, he had gone to the house Sandra's. Then, Tracy and Paul had devised an escape plan, and it was Tracy who proposed drastic measures. She wanted to kill her mother to prevent her from ever finding her. The next morning, Candace stopped by to pick up Tracy, and they left for school together. Meanwhile, Paul was hiding in the bedroom with a tree branch he intended to use as a weapon. He claimed he found it in the house and did not plan to kill Sandra. He only wanted to strike her so she would lose consciousness. However, the police were skeptical of his explanation. They questioned why he would sneak into the house and attack her if he didn't intend to kill her, knowing she could eventually regain consciousness and report him. It seemed clear to the investigators that his intention was murder, which would allow him to escape without being caught. Paul continued his story. He claimed that Sandra surprised him by opening the door and immediately began yelling and insulting him. In a fit of anger, he wrapped a cord around Sandra's neck and strangled her until she stopped breathing. Afterward, he covered she with a blanket and fled the scene. Meanwhile, Tracy, smiling, testified in the next room. Their accounts were similar, except for how much blame they placed on each other. Tracy asserted that she did not act alone. She claimed that she and Paul planned the murder together, but only Paul killed her mother. Tracy insisted that she had no role in the crime. She also revealed that the wooden figurine used in the murder was hidden in the backyard. The police later found the figurine there, along with Sandra's blood on it. The prosecutor's office was prepared to charge Tracy and Paul with first-degree murder. According to state law, the maximum penalty for this crime was life imprisonment. Paul's defense argued that he acted under Tracy's influence, claiming he should be guilty of manslaughter instead. Conversely, Tracy's lawyer argued that Paul was the instigator, as he was the one who strangled Sandra, while Tracy played a secondary role. The trial began on February 26, 1999, with both defense teams trying to downplay their clients' involvement in the horrific crime to lessen their possible sentences. During the trial, the young defendants, Tracy and Paul, displayed disrespectful behavior and laughed provocatively. Tracy refused to meet with her family, even though they wanted to discuss her involvement in Sandra's murder. Her brother, Chad, particularly wished to speak with her. On April 22, 1999, the court sentenced Tracy Miles and Paul Nelson to life in prison, with a minimum of 25 years before they can apply for parole. After the judge announced the sentence, Paul made an obscene gesture. Both Tracy and Paul expressed dissatisfaction with the verdict and showed no signs of remorse for their actions. In the future, Tracy and Paul will have the chance to request early release, but Sandra's relatives hope that this does not occur. Hello again, true crime fans. We've got another mysterious case to explore. The case of Melania Ray. This is the story of Melania Ray, a striking woman who was a drill instructor in the Ken Regiment at the time of the incident. She was married to Salvatore Paralisi and they had a 1-year-old daughter, Vittoria. The family lived in a small village called Oscolaquina, near the San Marco Plateau in Italy. At this time, tourists walking along the paths below the mountainside could not see the flowers that usually bloom on the plateau because the snow had only recently melted. However, a bar and small shops were open, allowing visitors to stroll and enjoy the view. The tragedy occurred on Monday, April 18, 2011, around 3 p.m. On that day, Salvatore arrived in the area with his young daughter after parking his car nearby. He entered a small bar, used the restroom, and then asked the locals if they had seen his wife, Melania. She had recently given birth and had gone missing. At the time, she was 28 years old, athletic, and had long dark hair. When Salvatore learned that no one had seen Melania, he became more anxious, pacing back and forth. He eventually broke down in tears, expressing his fear that his wife had been kidnapped. The people there decided to support him and his daughter by helping to search for Melania. They went out onto the porch and walked along the path from the parking lot to the bar, hoping to find any sign of her, but they found nothing. The Salvatore explained that earlier that morning, he had been with his wife. After lunch, they went to the plateau, where he played with his daughter near the swings in the playground. His wife had planned to step away briefly to buy coffee and use the restroom, but she did not return. Sensing that something was wrong, he began calling her numerous times over the past 15 minutes, but she didn't answer. He realized her phone was missing and suspected that she might have been kidnapped by people in a passing car. The Salvatore remained at the bar and spoke with the owner, Giovanna, but the longer he stayed, the more unusual his behavior seemed. First, Salvatore was inadequately dressed for a cool spring day. Second, he seemed to neglect his 1-year-old daughter while he grieved for his missing wife. The little girl wandered through the bar, grew hungry, and felt cold, but her father paid no attention to her needs, continuing to cry and recount his story about his wife's disappearance. At 4:34 p.m., a call came into the local police station from Giovanna, the owner of a bar. She called the emergency services because Salvatore had just left, reporting that he had not been able to find his wife for over an hour and was concerned that she might have been kidnapped. He had his young daughter, just over a year old, with him and the father was clearly upset. When he returned to the bar, Giovanna handed him the phone to speak to the police. The shaky man gave the dispatcher some details about himself and his missing wife, Melania. He mentioned that she had a hernia, which may have worsened as they were near the mountains. He repeated the story he had shared with others, emphasizing that Melania had disappeared after going to the bar. Throughout the call, he spoke very softly, often mumbling and stuttering, and there were long pauses. Police had to ask nearly every question multiple times to get him to respond. When the police arrived, he repeated his story, explaining that Melania had health problems, so they were forced to go to the nearest hospital. They then decided to stop for a walk and coffee. While she was out, Salvatore stayed at the playground with their daughter, who was playing on the swings. When Melania did not return, he became concerned and tried calling her, but she did not answer. This was unusual, as she usually answered her calls. Worried about her silence, Salvatore eventually went to the bar where she was supposed to be and began asking people there if they had seen her. As time passed without any news, Salvatore grew increasingly desperate. The police asked him detailed questions about Melania's appearance and the moments leading up to her departure. Salvatore insisted that she was fine, she had just needed to use the restroom, and there was no sign of abnormal. At the scene, the police verified Salvatore's identity and began their investigation. They first conducted a quick analysis of his phone data, looking into his recent interests and searches to evaluate his credibility. The police learned about Salvatore Paralisi, born on August 28, 1987, in the province of Naples, Italy. At the time Melania went missing, he was with their daughter in Felina. His wife, Melania Ray, was born on May 24, 1982, in another small town in the province of Naples. Since both were military personnel, the Carabinieri promptly contacted their military unit for further information. To assist Salvatore, a friend of his who was also a police officer arrived at the scene. He wanted to help Salvatore take care of Vittoria. Eventually, the police were able to gather all the necessary information and then released Salvatore and his daughter. Melania's relatives were notified of the situation shortly after. They rushed to the scene to learn more about what had happened and assist in the search for Melania. During discussions with police, Salvatore acted unusually. As a military man, he knew it was important to provide accurate information to the police to help find his wife quickly. Instead, he dodged questions and slowed down the investigation. Police had to ask him for Melania's cell phone number 3 or 4 times before he shared the information. The police wanted to track Melania's mobile phone to locate her and track her movements. There were only 3 busy walkways between the bar and the playground. One was more than 100 meters long and was mostly visible from the kiosk cameras. The second was much longer and led to the War Memorial, a destination that often has a lot of people passing by. The third walkway, 150 meters long, was also closely monitored by cameras. Surprisingly, however, nothing was seen. The cameras did not record any footage of Melania, raising doubts about whether she had been in the area that day. Data shows that Melania's cell phone was last active at 2:45 p.m., just before she went missing. The activity was near the location where she had been staying with Salvatore and Vittoria. Unfortunately, this information did not lead to any further details. The only hope for the search lay with the National Mountain Rescue Service. Experts were called in to help, bringing equipment and sniffer dogs. Dogs' sense of smell is so acute that they can follow a scent for up to 20 days after being left behind. The dog quickly oriented itself and followed the asphalt road to the monument. At that point, the trail appeared to end, suggesting that Melania may have gotten into the car and driven away. However, Salvatore later mentioned that they had been in the area just over a week ago. This leaves 2 possibilities: the dog was following Melania's old scent or she had actually been abducted. Afterward, the police took Salvatore to the station for questioning. There, he recounted all the details of the day leading up to Melania's disappearance. According to him, she visited a physiotherapist around 11:30 a.m. They then went to a supermarket and later visited the San Marco clinic, where doctors diagnosed her with an inguinal hernia. After lunch, they returned home to change clothes before going for a walk with their daughter. Salvatore noted that they had been in the area for the past month, making Melania very familiar with the territory. Salvatore mentioned that he and Melania had gone to a bar together during their visit. After gathering all the necessary information, the police sent Salvatore home. The main theory of the police was kidnapping, based on information gathered with the help of sniffer dogs. They believed that Melania had approached the road, was abducted, and her trail suddenly ended. All the evidence suggested that she may have been forced into the car. In May, Salvatore appeared on television to share his story, revealing new details. He mentioned that he and his wife had a small picnic near the war memorial and were relaxing there on the day she disappeared. Salvatore also described the clothes and accessories Melania was wearing when she went missing. Interestingly, he noted that she did not have her handbag with her personal belongings at that time. She was wearing casual clothes and several gold ornaments. However, it was puzzling how a responsible woman could embark on a long trip with a child without any preparation or a handbag. She didn't even have money or cigarettes, which she usually smoked. Melania also forgot to bring a milk bottle and clothes for her daughter. Another point of confusion was how she could have gone to the bar to buy her husband coffee if she had no money. Salvatore's statements became increasingly contradictory, leading to suspicions that he might be lying. With these concerns in mind, the police decided to question Salvatore again to learn more. Salvatore claimed that they had a strong relationship and that they sometimes disagreed on various issues. But these disagreements never escalated into conflict. In general, they had a great, strong family, which was confirmed by relatives and friends. Therefore, the Salvatore was released. The next day, Melania's relatives arrived in town and stayed at a small apartment near the Salvatore home. Although exhausted from the trip, they made it a priority to visit the police station to ask about the investigation. They provided any information that could help locate Melania as quickly as possible. It was discovered that Melania had 2 phones that Salvatore did not mention. One phone was used to contact her husband and friends. The other phone was used to talk to her mother and close relatives. At 1:34 p.m. on the day Melania went missing, her mother-in-law called the second number. They had a conversation that lasted about 9 minutes, during which Melania shared details about the day. She mentioned that her family was going to San Marco to go for a walk and attend the christening of a friend's child at around 4 p.m. The call ended at 1:43 p.m., and there was no further communication. The police got no new information out of Salvatore. His testimony was largely a rehash of what they already knew. The police were puzzled by his decision to stay with the child. They questioned why Melania didn't bring Vittoria along when she went out for coffee. The trip from their house to the park took less than 20 minutes. Did Melania really need to go to the bathroom during that time? And most importantly, where did the girl go afterward? Melania's relatives moved into the Salvatore home and spoke to him regularly about the situation, but he remained quiet and sad, often avoiding their questions. Salvatore's relatives tried to support him as much as possible, helping him care for Vittoria. On April 19, 2011, the entire city learned of Melania's disappearance. This was shocking, as the suburb was known to be one of the quietest and most peaceful areas in the area. Although the police suspected Salvatore, he had no previous legal problems. Salvatore frequently appeared on various television shows, discussing the tragedy he was facing. To clarify what had happened that morning, police checked Salvatore's cell phone. They found that it had been on from 7 a.m. to 9 a.m. but then turned off until 6 p.m. That same day, Salvatore drove to Plateau San Mar, where the armed forces, police, and search teams were working. However, he showed little interest in the search efforts or their progress. Instead, he returned the sweatshirt he had borrowed from Giovanna, a bar owner, on the day Melania went missing and quickly left, claiming that he had to go to work. His behavior aroused suspicion among the police. While examining Salvatore's mobile phone, the Carabinieri found something noteworthy. He had been in constant communication with a girl named Lodovica for the past month, exchanging thousands of messages and making calls almost every day. It became clear that he was having a romantic affair with her. Salvatore had fallen in love with Ludovica Pero in September 2009. And their relationship continued even at home in 2011, after Melania went missing. In the summer of 2009, Melania discovered his infidelity and was furious. At the time, she moved in with her parents and she was pregnant with their daughter. Despite this, Salvatore continued to pursue Ludovica, who was 27 at the time and working in their military unit. Eventually, for the sake of their child, Salvatore and Melania reconciled, and she returned home. However, his love affair continued. He often rented an apartment to see Ludovica. After completing her training, Ludovica was sent to Rome, but their relationship continued. Salvatore spent most of his free time talking to her on the phone. Their conversations showed that Ludovica wanted more than a long-distance relationship, but Melania's presence got in the way. In the months leading up to Melania's disappearance, there had been tension between Ludovica and Salvatore. Ludovica wanted him to be with her, and he kept delaying their time together. Melania was determined to keep their marriage intact, especially after discovering that her husband was still seeing Ludovica. She even threatened to expose his relationship with his mistress, which could have jeopardized Salvatore's job. This threat scared him, causing him to distance himself from Ludovica. Melania believed that her tactics had worked, thinking that their relationship was back to normal and that Salvatore's feelings for Ludovica were just a passing love. Melania was determined not to give in. She wanted to resume their relationship, while Ludovica was urging him to leave his family for her. He found himself caught between two women. The situation escalated to the point where, on April 19th, Salvatore traveled to Rome to meet Ludovica's parents, hoping they could start a life together. The issue was that Melania was completely unaware of this plan. At the same time, he was supposed to be spending the holidays with his family, including Melania and their daughter. Just a day before this meeting. However, his wife went missing. This turn of events seemed very suspicious, as love triangles rarely have happy endings. When Salvatore returned to work after his wife went missing, management suggested a rescue operation. They suggested assembling a team of soldiers and using specialized equipment. However, Salvatore remained remarkably calm and insisted that such an operation was unnecessary. He believed that his wife had left him out of resentment, so no operations needed to be organized. Salvatore then deleted his social media accounts, which he had used to communicate with Ludovica. This led the police to discover a potential motive for the crime. By now, the crucial time to find the missing person alive had passed. The police took the situation seriously and concluded that they had no chance of finding Melania alive. The search dog used in the investigation did not detect new traces or scent of Melania. On April 23rd, police received a call from an unknown man who identified himself as a mushroom picker. He reported seeing the body of a woman 17 kilometers from Felina. Police arrived at the scene shortly after. The body was found to be Melania's. Forensic experts discovered multiple injuries on her body during the autopsy. These injuries were consistent with stab wounds caused by small knives, mainly to the head and neck. There were also injuries to her chest and some self-defense wounds. Although Melania was not raped, significant evidence was collected from the scene, including her cell phone, a bloody lighter, a water bottle, and traces of a small car. The most important piece of evidence was a grocery store receipt from the morning of April 18th. Additionally, insulin syringes were found nearby, suggesting that Melania may have been abusing drugs. However, a toxicology report confirmed that there were no traces of alcohol or illegal drugs in Melania's system. The police received information from Salvatore about an interesting coincidence. A few days before Melania went missing, she and her husband had an intimate encounter in the same area behind the kiosk where her body was later discovered. Somehow, this information reached Ludovica, who was furious, having been lied to. He had repeatedly assured Ludovica that he was no longer intimate with his wife. This revelation only added to the complexity surrounding their relationship. However, on the day of their encounter, it was snowing and very cold, making it unlikely that they would engage in intimate relations outdoors. Additionally, it was known that Melania was experiencing pain from an inguinal hernia at that time. Given these factors, the narrative of a passionate encounter at the kiosk doesn't seem reasonable. However, this is just an assumption that needs to be proven. The police conducted a thorough search of the surrounding area for any traces of blood. They discovered various pieces of evidence, including shoe prints. In order to gather more information about the suspect, it was important to determine who was in the area at the time of the victim's death. During that time, soldiers from Salvatore's and Melania's regiments were present. In fact, the soldiers accidentally left behind some evidence, such as a water bottle, a store receipt, and shoe prints. This complicating factor hindered the police investigation because much of this evidence was irrelevant to the case. Additionally, the soldiers reported that they did not see anyone suspicious that day and confirmed that no body was present. The police decided to examine Ludovica more closely. They discovered that she did not leave the barracks on April 18th to 19th, providing her with a solid alibi for the time of the crime. Ludovica also shared crucial information, stating that on April 17th, she had spoken with Salvatore about their relationship. During this conversation, Salvatore mentioned that his wife was cheating on him. It was revealed that Ludovica was not Salvatore's only affair. He had previous relationships with other soldiers and women. Although Ludovica was aware of this, she did not consider it significant. Ultimately, it was uncovered that the Salvatore had been involved with several women simultaneously. Salvatore was aware that the police had obtained this information and feared it could be seen as a motive for the murder of Melania. To gather evidence against Salvatore, police installed a wiretap in his car and also eavesdropped on his telephone conversations. This yielded crucial information. Salvatore often talked to himself in the car about his wife's murder, raising suspicions of his involvement in Melania's death. Police obtained permission to search Salvatore's car with luminol, discovering traces of blood inside. Samples were sent to a lab, and subsequent testing confirmed the blood belonged to Melania. Meanwhile, the prosecutor's office was developing its theory to understand the motive behind the crime. They believed that Melania was a controlling person who harbored deep resentment towards her husband for his many betrayals, yet she kept him around for the sake of their child. This constant pressure worsened their situation. He sought an escape by starting a relationship with Ludovica, who also exerted pressure on him. In this relationship, he felt like a third wheel, leading him to consider getting rid of his difficult wife. Forensic experts have submitted their full report, confirming the findings of the medical examiner. They determined that Melania died between 2 p.m. and 3 p.m. on April 18th, from 35 stab wounds. It is likely that the attack occurred while she was urinating, as evidenced by her squatting position and an empty bladder. The attacker probably approached her from behind and struck when she least expected it, leaving little chance for her to defend herself. The nature of the wounds indicated that the assault was particularly brutal, stemming from personal animosity. It was confirmed that Melania never reached the plateau on the day she died, based on geolocation data from her mobile phone. The prosecutor's office believed they stopped near the kiosks in the pine forest, where they allegedly engaged in sexual intercourse. This occurred around 2:30 p.m., and it was at this point that Salvatore unexpectedly attacked and killed Melania. Afterwards, he returned home, changed his clothes, took their young daughter, and went straight to San Marco, where he entered a bar and pretended to be a heartbroken husband whose wife had left him. Despite his claims of innocence, the jury found the evidence against him compelling. As a result, Salvatore Paralisi was convicted and sentenced to 20 years in prison. He was also ordered to pay €2 million to Melania's family. Salvatore maintains his innocence and is currently serving his sentence in a reformatory in Milan. Custody of Melania, daughter, was given to her family. Now 13, Vittoria has expressed her desire to change her last name to her mother's. She does not visit her father and would rather he not know about her choices. Welcome back, detectives. Let's dive into another horrible case. The case of Amber Dubois and Chelsea King. Amber Dubois had just celebrated her 14th birthday. She was born in December, and both of her parents cherished her. In 1999, her parents separated, and she chose to live with her mother. However, she maintained regular contact with her father, Morris, and visited him later on. Her mother married Dave Cave, and together they had another daughter named Allison. The mother and her daughters shared a strong bond. Amber had a good relationship with her stepfather, whom she regarded as a second father, and he affectionately referred to her as his daughter. They all lived together in Dave's house as a tight-knit family. Amber was a girl who loved reading and writing stories. She eagerly consumed books and was not interested in the typical activities that girls her age usually enjoyed. She didn't care for shopping for makeup and clothes, and boys held no appeal for her at that time. Instead, she was passionate about studying. Amber frequently attended extra classes at school because she had set herself a challenging goal to master the curriculum ahead of schedule, and she was well ahead of her classmates. Her greatest passion was animals. She nurtured this love in many ways, from reading books to visiting various zoos and exhibitions. She adored all creatures, from insects to elephants, regardless of their appearance or size. Amber wrote detailed accounts of her experiences with these animals in her diary. This passion evolved from a hobby into a dream of becoming a marine biologist, focusing on animal behavior. Amidst this, she was excited about the opportunity to join a school program called Farmers of the Future, where students could acquire a farm animal. Amber was eager to buy a lamb. Amber's mother and stepfather were not very wealthy, but she strongly urged them to support her project financially. Although they were hesitant at first, they eventually agreed under her persuasion and gave her about $200 for a lamb. However, they wanted to make sure Amber understood the responsibilities that came with this decision. Her mother suggested Amber write a sort of business plan outlining the steps to achieve her goal. Amber wrote a thorough letter that spanned over 2 pages. Recognizing her understanding of the project, her mother agreed to help her carry out the plan. The Amber was excitedly awaiting the day she could pick up her little lamb, whom she had named Lynette. On Friday, February 13, 2009, Amber woke up and prepared for school, packing a receipt for the lamb in her backpack. She walked to school every day, taking a short 10-minute route. However, that day, she did not return home as expected. Her stepfather was the first to notice. Initially, Dave thought she might be spending time with animals or had already gone to pick up her lamb and simply lost track of time. He searched the area around their home but couldn't find her and called out her name, receiving no response. Concerned, he contacted the farmer from whom Amber was supposed to buy the lamb. But the farmer informed him that she had not visited. Next, he called his wife to tell her what had happened. In a state of panic, she quickly called her daughter but received no response. The mother then asked Dave to check both the club and the school for their daughter. He got into his car and drove to the club first, but the staff there informed him that they hadn't seen Amber. Next, he went to her high school, hoping she might still be there, perhaps staying late to take care of her animal or to work on a project. However, when he spoke to the girl's teacher, he was met with a shocking revelation. The teacher informed him that Amber had not attended school that day. Suddenly, It felt like the ground had disappeared beneath him, and his panic escalated, especially when her mother learned about her daughter's absence from school. Amber was an outstanding student, diligent, intelligent, and humble. She worked hard every day to achieve her goal of finishing school early. Under no circumstances could she skip school voluntarily, which led her mother to worry about the worst possible scenarios. On that particular day, Amber was also excited because she was finally going to get her own lamb, a dream she had cherished for a long time. Despite their fears, they held on to hope that she would be found soon. Amber's mother immediately called the police to report her missing. She cried on the phone, pleading with them to start the search for her daughter right away, and they quickly launched an investigation. Meanwhile, her mother took time off work and hurried home to search for Amber. She also informed Amber's biological father, who joined the search as well. Police officers arrived at their home and spoke with Amber's Dave and mother. They described Amber as a shy, home-loving girl who was focused on her studies and loved animals. They emphasized that she was not a troublemaker and had very few friends, making it unlikely that she had run away. Police examined Amber's belongings and concluded that she had not escaped from home. All her possessions and money were left behind, so the police decided to visit her school. They followed the route Amber took daily for many years, hoping to find clues about her whereabouts. It was suspected that she might have been meeting someone before she vanished, but they found no evidence along the way. The police then spoke to the Amber's classmates, who confirmed that she was very focused on her studies and rarely interacted with anyone. She didn't go to parties or have friends or a boyfriend, making it difficult for them to understand where she could have gone. The police also reviewed Amber's online searches and contacts, suspecting she might have engaged with a dangerous person who could have lured her into a trap. However, her search history only included harmless queries about animals, with nothing that raised any red flags. In a desperate effort to find the missing person, police sought help from the public, hoping to receive useful clues. They distributed posters and flyers with Amber's picture. With the help of many city residents, police received valuable information. Several witnesses reported seeing a girl resembling Amber on the morning of February 13th, walking alone on her way to school. One witness noted that she was wearing a sweatshirt because of the cool, light rain that morning. Soon after, another witness came forward. A family friend had driven her daughter to school, and her children were friends. At that time, she saw Amber walking and talking to a boy she did not recognize. The woman chose not to interrupt their conversation and continued driving. She described the boy as having dark skin and a round face, but she could not see him clearly. This was the only clue the police had. They focused on this information to try to identify the boy, but none of Amber's classmates could identify him. They then deployed bloodhounds to follow Amber's scent, leading the search party to Escato High School and along the highway to the remote Pala Indian Reservation. After the scent trail ended, the mother insisted that they had never been to the area and that Amber would not have gone there on her own, raising suspicions that someone had deliberately brought her to that location. News of Amber's disappearance quickly spread throughout the community and attracted significant media attention. This prompted many volunteers to form search parties and visit police stations to offer help. Eventually, the FBI became involved in the investigation. Agents first focused on known criminals in the area with a history of violent sex crimes, conducting over 500 interviews. Unfortunately, this effort did not yield any useful information. Police also re-examined Amber's home using luminol to look for blood, but found no signs of a struggle. They also reviewed all available surveillance footage along Amber's route, but although she appeared on several cameras, none captured the moment she disappeared. Time passed, and the police still had no valuable leads. Search teams could not find any clues. From all the information gathered, the police could only identify one suspect, Dave. This suspicion arose from the beginning of the investigation. His story seemed fabricated. The police closely examined the family and found an atmosphere of love and understanding. However, Dave had problems with his teenage stepdaughter, Amber. He felt that she should spend more time with the family, while she preferred to focus on her studies, participate in club activities, and spend time alone at home. Dave provided a confusing account of his activities on that fateful Friday. He claimed he didn't go to work, which was unusual for him. Instead, he attended a personal training session, returned home, and then left again. His inconsistent statements raised suspicion with the police. He also visited his wife at her workplace to give her chocolate-covered strawberries as a Valentine's Day gift, an unexpected gesture since it was the first time he had done something like that in their relationship. Additionally, he did not check the answering machine when he got home, which was unlike him. It seemed that Dave was preoccupied with something else, a fact that his wife noticed, remarking that his behavior that day was out of character. The police conducted a detailed investigation into the suspect's identity, but found no incriminating evidence. Eventually, they invited him to the station for several tests, including a lie detector test, which he accepted. Dave was asked to remove his shirt for an examination for scratches, but none were found. Furthermore, he passed 8 polygraph tests. As a result, Dave was ruled out as a suspect. Months passed without any news of Amber. Her mother could not shake the fear that Dave might be involved in Amber's disappearance. Overwhelmed by these thoughts, she packed her belongings, took her 7-year-old daughter, Allison, and left Dave. Worried about Allison's safety, she took an extended leave from work and kept a close watch on her daughter. The mother felt lost and hopeless. She hoped that Amber was still alive, but deep down, she knew that the chances were slim. In her desperation, she considered hiring a private investigator, using a dog, and even consulting a psychic to find clues about her daughter. The grief overwhelmed her, and without thinking it through, she suddenly left for Mexico with Allison after a stranger claimed to have seen Amber there. The mother traveled around the city handing out flyers and interviewing people to raise awareness about her missing daughter. Amber's biological father, Morris, was also determined to find her. He quit his job and spent all his savings on the search. The situation took a toll on him, but he persevered. The public response to Amber's disappearance was huge, leading to numerous newspaper articles and several films being made about her case. The entire country was shocked by Amber's disappearance. The number of witnesses contacting the police with various pieces of information increased, but none of this information was helpful to the investigation or provided valuable leads. On February 13, 2010, Amber's family held a fundraising event at a high school to support the ongoing search efforts, which they desperately needed. During the event, police representatives announced that there had been no progress in the investigation and that Amber was still missing. The community rallied around Amber's mother, expressing outrage that the perpetrator was still at large. On February 25, 2010, an unexpected event occurred when 17-year-old Chelsea King disappeared from Poe, a town just a 10-minute drive from Esca. Born in 1992, Chelsea had a younger brother named Tyler and was known for her intelligence, strong academic performance, and love for animals. She aspired to attend college and had already received several invitations, with teachers predicting a bright future for her in the sciences. Chelsea was also an avid runner and was out for a cross-country training run on the morning of her disappearance. However, she never returned home. By midday, her family realized she was missing and couldn't reach her by phone. What worried them most was not just her absence, but that she was ignoring their calls and messages, something she had never done before. Concerned for Chelsea's safety, Chelsea's relatives contacted the police, prompting a large-scale search for her. Police learned from the parents of the Chelsea that she had left home and driven to Burn Ranch Park in San Diego, a well-known spot for walking and recreation. While heading to the park to search for her, Chelsea's parents communicated with the police and provided a statement at the scene. They located their daughter's car parked in the lot, with her phone ringing inside, but Chelsea was missing. Following these developments, many volunteers joined the search efforts. In a wooded area, the Chelsea's socks and underwear were discovered discarded along a path about 3 kilometers from her car. This raised suspicions that a new victim of abduction may have experienced sexual abuse. There had been no news about Amber until her parents learned of this new case. Immediately, they traveled to the park where the incident occurred to assist in the search. Amber's parents believed these cases were related and felt it was their responsibility to support Chelsea's family. They aimed to collaborate in the effort to capture the dangerous criminal threatening the girls. Specially trained dogs participated in the operation, tracking a trail that led to Lake Hodges, situated near the park. This location became the focus of their search efforts. Soon after, they discovered additional items of clothing belonging to the athlete, specifically her sports top and one sneaker. As the search progressed, police reviewed the timeline of events and the most recent crime reports concerning the disappearances of girls. They were already aware of Amber's disappearance and sought out similar cases of attacks in the area from the past few years. A few months before Chelsea disappeared, a stranger attacked another girl who was jogging. This incident occurred on December 22, 2009, involving 22-year-old Candice Mankeo, who was running on her usual route near where Chelsea's clothes were later found. During her jog, a stranger suddenly grabbed Candice and threw her to the ground, trying to overpower her. She quickly realized that he intended to rape her. Candice fought back and screamed for help. After this, Candice managed to escape and struck the assailant in the nose with her elbow. The attacker screamed in pain and covered his face, giving her a few seconds to get away. The Candice immediately called the police to report the attempted rape. At that time, the investigation into Candice's case was still ongoing, but police lacked any leads. The police revisited the description of the rapist provided by the survivor. He appeared to be between 23 and 26 years old, fair-skinned with dark hair, and of large build. Meanwhile, the police received analysis results from Chelsea's belongings, which had been found in a wooded area. These results led to a significant breakthrough in the investigation. 2 different DNA profiles were identified on the clothing. The first matched Chelsea, but the second did not belong to her. This DNA profile was quickly entered into the police database, and forensic scientists soon made a 100% match. The DNA was linked to John Albert Gardner, known criminal with a history of sexual violence. Given this connection, police immediately began searching for him in relation to Chelsea's case. The John lived near Bernard's Ranch at the time of his arrest on February 28, 2010. He was 31 years old. Police first examined the John's properties. He owned and rented a significant amount of real estate, but they found no evidence of the Chelsea in any of these locations. After his arrest, the John requested a lawyer and refused to speak with police, which shortchanged the police of valuable time. Despite this setback, there was still hope that Chelsea was alive. The team began to closely analyze the John's profile to determine where he might have taken Chelsea after the kidnapping. John Albert Gardner was born in 1979 in California. He had a challenging childhood, as he frequently moved with his parents. His father struggled with alcoholism and was abusive towards both John and his mother. Additionally, John revealed that he experienced sexual harassment from a female family member, although he did not disclose her identity, stating it was not his mother. John's mother later noted that he had mental health issues from a young age. He spent time in a specialized clinic and took about 20 different medications, but none were effective. John was diagnosed with bipolar disorder and attention deficit syndrome, which caused his mood to fluctuate drastically. In stable moments, he was friendly and cheerful, but he could quickly become volatile when his darker tendencies emerged. In the year John was arrested, he invited a 30-year-old neighbor to his home to watch a movie. Instead of just watching a film, he began to harass her and then attacked and beat her. Fortunately, she survived the assault, managed to escape from his house, and reported him to the police. As a result, John was charged and sentenced to 6 years in prison. Psychiatrists believed he would continue to be a danger to society, yet he was given the opportunity for rehabilitation after his release. One psychiatrist even requested the maximum sentence for someone so dangerous. Despite this, John received a much shorter sentence and was released on parole after just 4 years. Following his release, he violated the terms of his parole dozens of times, but the police took no action. John stopped attending the meetings required by his parole, and there was a victim of one of his attacks who could identify him. However, Candace was visiting her parents for Christmas and was unavailable for questioning. As a result, police decided to visit her and brought 6 photographs. One photo was of the captured rapist, while the other 5 showed men who resembled John. When Candace saw the photo of John, she confidently identified him. All the evidence points to him, although John and his lawyers deny his involvement in Chelsea's disappearance. They cannot explain why his DNA was found on her underwear in the park. Police found it nearly impossible to communicate with the John. He would sit in silence, fixated on one spot, completely ignoring the police. Then, without warning, he would either scream in anger or laugh uncontrollably. At one point, John posed a critical question to the police, hinting that there might be other victims involved in the case. This was the first mention of a girl during the interrogation. The police had not yet investigated the John's connection to the disappearance of 14-year-old Amber, but John's question strongly suggested that his list of victims included not only Chelsea and Candace but also Amber. The police later learned that he had lived near Amber's home when she went missing. However, police chose not to inform the John that they suspected him in Amber's case. Instead, they passed this information to the department that had been investigating Amber's disappearance for over a year. Police worked together to unravel the details of the case. 5 days after the search for Chelsea King began, her body was discovered on March 2, 2010, on the southeast shore of Lake Hodges. She was buried in a shallow grave near the water. Chelsea had been raped and strangled, and male DNA found on her body was that of John Gardner. With this evidence, police were able to charge him with Chelsea's rape and murder, as well as the attempted rape of Candace. The final step was to establish his connection to Amber's disappearance. They continued gathering information and applying pressure on the suspect. John realized that the police would eventually uncover the truth, so he followed his lawyer's advice and decided to strike a deal to reduce his sentence by revealing the location of Amber's body. His only condition was that the fact he disclosed the grave of Amber would not be revealed during the trial. The prosecution accepted this condition. Following John's instructions, they went to Palu, which is near Iskandar. This area was only a few kilometers from where search dogs had previously alerted near an old water tower. The John indicated a spot on the ground, and they started digging. They eventually discovered a human body and retrieved the remains for examination. Dental records confirmed that the remains belonged to the missing Amber. By this time, the body had severely decomposed. Due to an agreement with the suspect, the prosecution was unable to reveal that John had pointed out the location of Amber's grave. As a result, they could not bring charges against him in connection with the case of schoolgirl Amber. Her family was devastated by this news. They had still held on to hope that their daughter was alive and would come home. Amber's family could not understand why John would kill Amber, especially since they had never hurt anyone. Chelsea's family also experienced similar pain over the murder of their daughters. Amber's parents were furious. They could not understand why the obvious culprit in their daughter's murder was not punished for his actions. However, the police gathered enough evidence to convict him of Chelsea's murder, which was a small but significant victory for the prosecutor's office. The prosecution even expected to achieve the death penalty for the brutal killer. Testimony, DNA evidence, and the victim's body strongly supported the prosecutor's case. However, there was a chance that Amber's case might never be officially resolved. To move forward, a plea deal was proposed involving the Chelsea family, and Amber agreed to this arrangement, which would lead to a guilty verdict for 2 murders. They proposed that John avoid the death penalty in exchange for confessing to the rape and attempted murder of Candace. The deal would save his life, and John promised to consider it. Amber's mother then asked to see John at the hospital. During their meeting, John recounted how, that morning, he had seen a pretty 14-year-old girl who strayed from her usual path to school to meet another girl. However, she never reached her destination. John stopped and threatened her with a gun, forcing her into his car. He then took her to a secluded area, where he raped her and began to strangle her. Despite her pleas for her life, he showed no mercy and strangled her, hiding the body afterward. After John finished telling his story, the mother of the Amber stood up and left without saying a word. She was too overwhelmed to respond. She realized that she had been wrong to suspect Dave of kidnapping Amber. That Dave forgave her for her previous resentment and suspicions. Eventually, the families were able to bury their daughters. In May 2010, John Gardner received 2 life sentences without the possibility of parole for the murders of the 2 girls, along with an additional 25 years for attacking Candace. John expressed remorse and stated that he felt guilty for his actions. Following this, he began experiencing mental health issues and sought medical treatment. After several years, Amber's mother was finally able to forgive her daughter's killer, which brought her relief and closure. This event had a significant impact on society, leading to changes in legislation regarding sexual assault offenders. Penalties, including fines and prison sentences, were increased, and the requirements for supervision after release were strengthened. Additionally, the conditions for parole for these offenses were re-evaluated. Welcome back, mystery lovers. Today's case is going to keep you on the edge of your seat. The case of Andrea Del Vesco. Andrea Del Vesco was born in Chicago, USA, in 1994. Her parents, Arthur and Leslie. Her older brother, James, was 2 years old at her birth, and her younger sister, Alexis, was born 4 years later. The family was happy and loving, moving several times before settling in Austin, Texas. Andrea's mother, Leslie, studied financial marketing at Southern Methodist University. She worked for American Airlines and then as a customer service manager in the mortgage division of Citibank. Andrea's father, Arthur, managed the family's assets as the owner of an investment firm. His hard work helped the family become quite wealthy, allowing them to live comfortably. The family's wealth enabled them to send all their children to university. Before that, the children attended a private school with a rigorous academic program taught by the best teachers in the state. From an early age, they engaged in a wide range of activities, from sports to religion, which helped instill high moral values in them. Andrea excelled academically, played sports, and developed in a well-rounded manner. She loved visiting museums and learning about art. She is kind and caring towards those around her. She has a particularly close relationship with her mother. From a young age, Andrea and her family traveled a lot, which broadened her horizons and exposed her to many different people and cultures. As she grew up, Andrea became her parents' hope and pride. In 2012, after finishing school, she applied to several educational institutions simultaneously. Her parents hoped she would attend the University of Chicago, where her older brother was studying, and for a while, Andrea preferred this option too. However, she decided to wait until she received responses from all the schools she applied to before making a decision. Ultimately, she chose the psychology department at the University of California, Los Angeles. By 2022, this university was ranked among the best in America. It has always been highly regarded and prestigious, with highly qualified teachers and a strong scientific and technical foundation. This choice reassured her family. Andrea then moved to Los Angeles to attend school. Her parents were happy with her decision and supported her choice, although they were worried that she would be too far away. Her brother would no longer be able to take care of her. With the support of her family, she began her new life. Upon arrival, Andrea needed to choose a club to join, which helped her develop lasting friendships and gain support from more experienced students. To become a full member, one usually needed to pass a test and make a small donation. The student community was very close-knit, with many students living so openly that they left their doors unlocked, allowing them to visit each other freely. Although it was generally safe, incidents could still occur. Andrea happily joined the club. She had a great sense of humor, was good-looking, and dressed well. Her impeccable style made her popular. She also created many extravagant outfits that amazed everyone. Andrea was the center of attention at any party. However, she balanced her social life with her studies. After completing her freshman year, she got a job as a paralegal at a law firm in Brentwood, handling administrative tasks. This job did not fit her schedule, so she found a new part-time job. She kept changing jobs to better balance her work and studies, allowing her to have pocket money and not have to depend on her parents. Andrea continued her student life until she graduated in 2015. She always dreamed of traveling after finishing her studies. As her senior year approached, she lived in a dormitory just 5 minutes away from the main university building. This dorm is a great place for students, hosting many sorority parties and university events. Andrea shares her living space with her sorority friends and a small dog she adopted from a rescue. She loves her pet so much that she even has a social media page dedicated to posting cute pictures of it. One day, the dog goes missing, leaving Andrea devastated as she searches frantically for it. Luckily, her beloved dog is found 5 days later. In September, Andrea is preparing to start her senior year of college, with classes scheduled to begin on September 24th. However, the fall semester officially starts on the 21st. On the 19th, she shares one of her favorite music videos on her social media page. The very next day, September 20th, 2015, is the last day before the girls in the club returned to school. Everyone was having fun on the balcony of the apartment building. Andrea was at a club activity until 3 in the morning with her friend Jessica. Jessica then went to her bedroom around 3:30 and went to sleep, while Andrea lay on the couch in the living room. However, Andrea could not sleep that night. A few hours later, Samantha, another neighbor, came running to Andrea's door, screaming about a fire. Andrea's door was closed, which was unusual because she always left her room open for her friends in the club. Samantha tried to open the door but couldn't, so she called the other girls to help. Together, with great difficulty, they managed to open the door and found the room filled with smoke and fire. They found Andrea lying motionless on the bed but could not call her because of the danger. Realizing that they could not safely enter the room, the girls evacuated and called 9 people at a time. They waited on the sidewalk for help. Later, the fire truck arrived at the scene. Firefighters quickly used hoses to extinguish the fire on the second floor. A total of 32 firefighters worked to effectively extinguish the fire. After the incident, rumors spread among the students that Andrea was dead, as she had not escaped the building and was not seen. When the firefighters finally entered the room, they found the body of a woman lying on her bed. During the investigation, the police determined that the fire started in Andrea's bedroom. At the scene, the police were unable to identify the deceased because her face was disfigured by the fire. They were only able to confirm that it was a female body. Fingerprints could not be taken because her hands were too badly burned. Surprisingly, the girl's small dog was found by firefighters. The dog was severely burned, barely breathing at the feet of its owner. However, it was later decided to euthanize the dog to reduce its suffering. After the incident, the dormitory students were relocated to different housing while repairs started on the burned building. The girls were frightened, leading the university to enhance campus security. Everyone believed that Andrea was the victim of the fire since all other students were confirmed safe during roll call. They reported seeing Andrea lying on her bed in the room that was on fire and were puzzled as to why she did not get up and leave. They found it odd and speculated that she might have lost consciousness, suffocated from carbon monoxide, or had already died. Andrea's parents returned to Austin from a long trip, unaware of what had happened to their daughter. They began to worry when Andrea did not reach out to them, and their attempts to contact her were unsuccessful. Concerned, her mother called one of their neighbors and learned about the fire, which might have involved Andrea. However, the police had not yet confirmed the identity of the body found at the scene. The entire family gathered to pray for Andrea's safety and traveled to Los Angeles. Meanwhile, police began investigating the case. They discovered that Jessica, Andrea's neighbor, was the last person to communicate with her before the tragedy. Police planned to interview Jessica to gather details about their last conversation, hoping she might have witnessed something important. Police interviewed Jessica to learn how the fire started, but her answers were not helpful. She quickly stated that she saw nothing and had no idea what caused the fire. Friends from the sisterhood, who also spoke with the police, suggested that Andrea may have accidentally fallen asleep with an aromatic candle still lit. They were convinced that the fire was not set intentionally, as Andrea had no enemies or anyone who wished her harm. To verify this theory, a detailed examination of the incident scene was needed. Initially, they inspected electrical appliances and outlets for any short circuits, but everything appeared to be in order. No candles were found at the scene, and the only item that raised suspicion was the trash can located at the head of the bed. Experienced firefighters speculated that this could be the starting point of the fire. However, friends and members of the sisterhood confirmed that Andrea never slept near the trash can, which was typically placed at the opposite end of the room. Unfortunately, the contents of the can could not be identified without a detailed chemical analysis, as everything was completely destroyed. Forensic experts specializing in arson were called in to investigate. 2 hours after the fire was put out, police were convinced that it was not accidental. The critical piece of evidence was a metal trash can, which someone could have used to pour flammable liquid and ignite a fire. The flames originated near the head of the girl's bed and spread throughout the room. Forensic experts confirmed their suspicions when it was clear that the fire was intentionally set. The investigation at the crime scene intensified. Forensic experts found a large number of traces of blood splashes on the bed and around it, with most of the stains surviving the fire. Police were concerned when neighbors reported trying to call the Andrea as they entered her room at the start of the fire, but she did not respond and was found lying motionless. They feared she was already dead and suspected that the perpetrator had set the fire to destroy evidence. By this time, the police had already pieced together a rough timeline of the events from that tragic evening. They interviewed many students, focusing mainly on the roommates. According to the roommates, a group of girls had been chatting on the balcony before entering the apartment building. The last confirmed sighting of Andrea alive was at 5:50 a.m. Samantha, her roommate, was preparing for work on campus and saw that Andrea was sleeping on the couch in the living room at that time. Samantha left for work and returned around 6:30 a.m., but Andrea was no longer on the couch. She had gone to her room, but this time her door was closed, which was unusual for her. This behavior struck Samantha as odd, and she wondered why Andrea had suddenly gone to her room and shut the door, especially after being fast asleep before. Feeling concerned, Samantha noted this difference when she then saw the fire. While talking to other students in the dorm, the police discovered a significant clue. A girl named Sarah returned to her room around 5:30 a.m. after dropping her boyfriend off at the airport. Her apartment was directly above Andrea's room. Since it was still dark at that hour, Sarah noticed a male figure as she tried to open her front door. The building was for women, but it wasn't unusual for guys to visit their girlfriends, so she didn't think much of it at first. However, she became alarmed when the man immediately ran away upon seeing her, as if he was trying to hide. This frightened and confused her. She described the man as wearing a black baseball cap, a black and white t-shirt, and dark jeans. Feeling scared, Sarah hurried into her room and locked the door. Once inside, she quickly texted her boyfriend to tell him about the suspicious man she had seen. Unsure whether he posed a threat or if she should contact the police, she shared her concerns. Her boyfriend reassured her that it was likely just someone visiting, suggesting there was no need to panic. Later Sarah went to bed, but around 6:15, she was awakened by a woman's scream and the frantic barking of a dog from the room below her, where Andrea lived. This startled her, especially since the dog had never barked before and usually stayed calm. She realized something was wrong downstairs. Sarah tried to reach Andrea to check on her, but couldn't get in touch. She called 911, but the emergency services didn't take her seriously because the area was known for its student parties and noise. Still, a patrol car was dispatched to the dormitory. The police arrived around 6:23 but left a few minutes later without updating Sarah on their findings. They reported seeing nothing unusual, no person, no barking dog, and no screams. They only shined their flashlights into Andrea's room from the street without conducting a thorough investigation. Believing that someone might have had too much to drink or had an argument that upset the dog, the police decided to leave. Meanwhile, Sarah was watching from the window and tried calling Andrea, but no one answered. She also tried to contact the other girls in the building, but it seemed that everyone was asleep. After the police left, she heard a loud bang at around 6:45 a.m. Sarah rushed to the balcony and looked down, seeing thick smoke rising. She also spotted a stranger in a black and white t-shirt jumping from the balcony below. Panicking, Sarah feared that the man had harmed Andrea. She quickly grabbed her phone and called 911 to report the situation, then ran downstairs, where other students had gathered near Andrea's room, trying to open the door. Sarah quickly left the building to chase the intruder. She spotted him and ran after him down the street, but he escaped by getting into a red Nissan and driving away. Sarah recalled a detail on the car window that had a fraternity sticker. Meanwhile, Andrea's friends had made it into her room. They called out to her, but there was no response. The students claimed they saw her lying motionless on her bed, surrounded by flames. Several girls noticed blood on her neck, chest, and shoulders. In a panic, the friends left the burning house and saw the red Nissan speeding away, with Sarah in pursuit. However, none of Andrea's friends could identify anyone who might have wanted to harm her. All of her friends had cared for her, and at the time of her death, she was not in a romantic relationship. The investigation looked into the possibility of a robbery, but nothing was stolen from Andrea's room. It is thought that Andrea may have met someone on Tinder and the date did not go well. But this has not been confirmed as there are no leads. The police reviewed the surveillance footage from the campus, but it was unhelpful because of its poor quality. They searched all nearby streets for a red Nissan car with a fraternity sticker that had been spotted near the crime scene. Police interviewed all the students, focusing on fraternity members and residents of nearby homes. Nicholas and Mohair later reported a burglary, claiming that their laptops and speakers had been stolen, and one of them said that the keys to his red Nissan were also missing. This occurred on the same evening as Andrea's murder. A few days after the fire, police officially identified the charred remains as belonging to 21-year-old Andrea Delvesco, using dental records provided by her family. An autopsy conducted on September 22 indicated that she was wearing only a sports bra at the time of her death, which raised suspicions of rape, although this could not be confirmed due to the condition of her body. Most of her hair had been burned away, and there was significant blood loss, particularly from the back of her head. Approximately 90% of her body was burned. Forensic experts found multiple fatal stab wounds on Andrea's body, mainly to her head and neck. She had 5 stab wounds on the right side of her neck and 2 on the left, for a total of 19 stab wounds. The lack of soot and carbon monoxide in her body suggests that Andrea was dead before the fire started. This suggests that the fire was an attempt to cover up the crime rather than the cause of death. As a result, the investigation was upgraded to a murder case, creating a sense of fear across the campus. On the day the official forensic report was made public, police traced a stolen laptop and speakers to a man named Joseph in Fresno, California, which is over 3 hours from the crime scene. Police quickly going to his address. When police met Joseph, he claimed that he had borrowed the speakers from his roommate and that he had done nothing wrong. The situation became more complicated when the stolen items were passed around. His friend was Alberto Medina. Alberto claimed that he had lent the items to Joseph, explaining that his friends, who were moving out, had given them to him for safekeeping. However, Alberto then disappeared. Police began searching for Alberto on September 24th. He was arrested 2 days later and brought in for questioning. Alberto's testimony was inconsistent. He said that on September 18th, he went to the University of California with his friend Eric Marquez. They spent the week together, attending a Chris Brown concert and then going to a party with friends who had laptops and speakers. Under pressure from police, Alberto eventually confessed that he had stolen the items from random people while intoxicated and unaware of his actions, and returned home around 5:30 a.m. The police noted that the fire had not started at that time. When questioned about a suspicious stranger, Alberto unexpectedly claimed he was attacked by someone with a gun while they were returning with the stolen items. The attacker fired at them but missed, allowing them to escape. Alberto described the attacker as wearing dark jeans and a black and white t-shirt, matching the description Sarah had previously given. However, the police still expressed doubts about Alberto's story. Alberto suddenly remembered that his friend Eric had visited Andrea, a beautiful blonde woman he met at a party that same weekend. Eric planned to be intimate with her. When Eric returns to the apartment, he acts strange and nervous. Eric says he hit her and urges Alberto to leave quickly. Alberto's account implicates Eric in Andrea's murder. 5 days after the murder, the police interviewed a new suspect named Eric Marquez. He was 22 years old and a fifth-year medical student at the university. Eric had no previous legal problems and was viewed as a good person. His friend Alberto pointed the police to his home, which was only a 5-minute walk from the crime scene. However, getting Eric to confess was challenging. He stated that he spent the entire weekend drinking at home and hardly went out. Alberto and Eric's testimony was confirmed by surveillance camera footage from their home. When the footage was reviewed, both Eric and Alberto were active from 3 a.m. to 8 a.m., frequently wandering the streets. Alberto was wearing a black and white t-shirt and dark jeans. At 4 a.m., Alberto and Eric left the house for an extended period of time. Alberto was easily recognized by the distinctive tattoos on his arms. A key moment in the footage is Alberto returning to the apartment at around 7:11 a.m. with Andrea's red blanket wrapped around him. This corresponds to the time of the arson. Additionally, a red Nissan, matching Sarah's description, was spotted on video. By 7:30 a.m., Alberto and Eric were seen leaving the house again to throw away some trash. At this time, Alberto was shirtless and Eric had changed his clothing. While the cameras captured this evidence, Eric insisted he could not remember anything. Police obtained a search warrant for Alberto and Eric's apartment. A thorough inspection revealed that Alberto had suffered abrasions to his hands, while Eric had no similar injuries. Police found the red Nissan, which had blood on the steering wheel, dashboard, and driver's door, along with trash and a black sock inside. In the apartment's closet, police discovered a trash bag filled with bloody clothing, Andrea's underwear, and a black sock that matched the sock found in the car, a bloody knife, and a blanket missing from Andrea's room. After conducting the inspection, police gathered enough evidence to formally charge Alberto and Eric. On September 28, Alberto and Eric were charged with murder and burglary, and Albert was additionally charged with arson. Despite the threat of the death penalty, both pleaded not guilty. Their families insisted on a thorough, independent investigation, unable to accept that their son could have committed such a heinous act. Police later interviewed Joseph Garcia, who was found using a stolen laptop and speakers. He claimed that he had witnessed Alberto and Eric returning home that evening. Alberto had confided in him about the incident at the dormitory. He had entered Andrea's room after watching her while she walked her dog, then snuck inside. Alberto took a knife from the kitchen, forced Andrea into the room, and locked the door. He raped her, and when she screamed and fought back, he stabbed her to death and burned the house to cover up his crime. Alberto threatened Joseph to keep quiet. An expert found DNA evidence that showed blood on the suspect's clothes and car matched Andrea's DNA. Additionally, a witness named Julio, a cleaner, observed Alberto getting out of his car and walking toward Andrea's dorm. Julio noted that Alberto had a large tattoo on his arm and was wearing a black and white t-shirt. Alberto and Eric both appeared drunk and said they needed to go to Andrea's room because she needed help. Police determined that Alberto had entered the building while Eric was still in the car, so the blood was only found on the driver's side. Andrea's family was outraged by the police's inaction when Sarah first raised her concerns. The officers neglected to check Andrea's room, the likely scene of the crime. The Los Angeles Police Department announced that the officers involved have been suspended and an internal investigation has been launched to look into their negligence in responding to a call from the victim's friend, Sarah. The findings of that investigation have been submitted to the court. Although the officers were acquitted but were still fired. In the fall of 2016, Eric went on trial for his role in Andrea's murder, along with charges of robbery and arson. Eric and Alberto were charged with animal cruelty due to the injuries Andrea's dog suffered in the fire. In September 2017, the possibility of the death penalty was considered for Alberto. His attorneys urged him to accept a plea deal to receive a lighter sentence and avoid the death penalty, but he refused. As a result, the case was split into two separate trials. Eric was sentenced to 2 years and 8 months after pleading guilty to accessory and abetting. It was determined that he did not participate in the murder or arson. He remained in the car throughout the incident. Alberto Medina's trial began on May 15, 2018. He faced a jury on 5 different charges. Despite this, Alberto chose not to accept the plea deal offered by the prosecution. On May 24, 2018, after extensive deliberation, Alberto pleaded guilty to first-degree murder, arson, animal cruelty, and burglary. The judge decided against the death penalty, sentencing him to life in prison without the possibility of parole. Additionally, the court imposed another 12 years for other charges. Hello again, true crime fans. We've got another mysterious case to explore. The case of Sidney Powell. Brenda Powell was born in 1969 in Saline, Agua, USA. She graduated from high school and then attended Akron University. After completing her studies, she began working as a pediatrician in the oncology department of her local children's hospital. For over 28 years, she has dedicated herself to helping sick children. Brenda oversees inpatient care and is known to her peers and hospital staff as a calm, quiet person who is exceptionally kind to both patients and their parents. In November 1996, Brenda, 27, married Stephen Powell and took his last name. They were introduced through a mutual friend who worked with her at the hospital. The couple enjoyed a happy life together for 23 years and welcomed 2 children. A daughter named Sydney and a son named Andrew. Since childhood, Sydney has been passionate about sports, especially football. Her family watched football together every Sunday, which helped strengthen their relationship. They also regularly visited the beach and Disneyland. As Sydney grew older, she and her mother, Brenda, began to spend more time together. While her father and brother watched football, they enjoyed shopping, which further strengthened their relationship. Sydney did well in high school, which helped her pass her exams and gain admission to Mount Union University, where she also received a scholarship. In college, she became friends with Lauren and a group of female students while living on campus. She participated in school events and was introduced to many different activities. Friends described Sydney as friendly and easygoing. Sydney's academic journey took an unexpected turn after her first year. Initially, everything seemed fine. She excelled in her classes and was praised by her teachers, ranking among the top students. Sydney began working part-time during the summer holidays to earn extra money. However, during her second year, Sydney faced significant challenges and decided to move off campus. Her friends were initially confused by this sudden decision but later learned that Sydney was struggling academically. Her grades were dropping. Additionally, Sydney began sleeping excessively, often around 16 hours a day. Sydney's friends thought she could handle it all because she was a smart and hardworking student who had previously done well in school. Unfortunately, Sydney struggled and ended up failing 3 out of 4 exams. Due to strict regulations, she received a notice of expulsion from the university, which shocked everyone. Sydney was worried and shared her concerns with her friends. Fortunately, they informed her that she could reapply for admission. At the beginning of 2020, Sydney resumed her studies, attending classes and sorority meetings. She happily told her friends that she had been readmitted to the university and was doing well. In early February, Sydney was notified that she had to leave the school permanently and that her expulsion would remain in effect. She was offered assistance with moving and packing, and the school planned to notify her parents of her situation to help cover her expenses. However, Sydney told the school administration that her family already knew and did not need to be contacted. This was not true, and she was afraid that her parents would find out about her expulsion. During this time, she told her parents that she was doing well in school and had good grades, and that she had even won a scholarship. Her parents trusted her and had no reason to doubt her. After being evicted from campus, Sydney left but did not return home before the end of February. Instead, she stayed with friends in various hotels, paying in cash to avoid being tracked and to keep her situation at the university a secret. Although she worked part-time to support herself, her earnings were insufficient. Sydney constantly searched for online opportunities to make money but could not find a full-time job that would provide adequate support. She continued to live in hotels or with friends, afraid to go home. She cut back on everything and often did not eat enough. Eventually, she decided to return home, claiming that the campus was closed for renovations. She told her parents that she would stay with them while she went to college and still work. Her parents believed her and thought everything was fine. Sydney has been lying to her mother by saying that she is fine. Recently, Brenda has noticed some strange changes in her daughter's behavior. She discovers that Sydney is spending more time at home and not going to school, which raises concerns. This information later comes to light because Sydney's entire family uses the Life 360 app, a mobile phone location tracking app on a map for safety, allowing family members to know where each other are. On February 25, 2020, Brenda received a notification from the app that Sydney had stayed home all day instead of coming to college as scheduled. This worried Brenda, who was concerned that something was wrong. She contacted her daughter to find out what was going on. Sydney replied that she had a week off because her teacher was absent. She mentioned that students were given assignments to complete at home and were participating in remote learning. However, Brenda began to doubt Sydney's story. She told her daughter that her explanations did not seem right and reminded her of the importance of good grades to maintain her scholarship and graduate, which would affect her future job opportunities. She also emphasized the importance of attending school regularly. Sydney then reassured her mother that everything was fine and that she should not worry. The deception continued. On March 2nd, Sydney texted her mother, saying she was going to school and would be back by 2:30 p.m. Instead, she spent time with a friend, watching TV, while lying about her college situation. During this time, the parents noticed that something was wrong. Their daughter did not receive the scholarship, so her father, Stephen, had to pay her tuition. He tried to send money through the payment gateway, but could not complete the transaction because he had lost access to his account. Initially, he suspected a technical problem and decided to wait. However, when Stephen logged in on March 3rd while working at a metallurgical plant, he was still unable to complete the transaction. He then asked his daughter about the problem. Sydney reassured him not to worry and promised that she would look into the matter and resolve it. Stephen realized he could not delay any longer as the deadline was near, and he needed to pay for his daughter's studies quickly. He decided to contact the university himself to resolve the situation. When he called, the staff checked their records and informed him that Sydney was not listed as a student, meaning her access had been revoked. Stephen was shocked and thought there must be some mistake. He requested they verify the information again, and they confirmed that Sydney had indeed been expelled. However, the university staff would not disclose the date of her expulsion, citing confidentiality rules. Stephen used a tracking app to locate Sydney, who was supposed to be in class. Instead, he discovered she was at home while he was at work. He wanted to go home to talk to her, but he feared she might track his movements and run away. To avoid this, he left his phone at work and headed home. Before leaving, he called Sydney to gather information, but she avoided giving clear answers. During the conversation, she admitted that she was struggling at university and didn't like it there. However, she continued to lie, not confessing that she had been expelled a long time ago. Instead, she claimed she had just not been attending classes. Stephen was troubled by his daughter's situation. He believed she was capable and had a bright future ahead, but he worried that her lack of commitment to attending classes could hinder her progress. He wanted to talk to her about the issue so they could find a solution together. On his way to work, Stephen called Brenda to inform her about their daughter's learning difficulties. Although Brenda suspected something was wrong, she hoped it was not true. Throughout the call, Stephen was concerned about Sydney's situation. However, Brenda reassured him. With a background in psychology, she had a skill for helping others and wanted to use her experience to support their daughter. She promised Stephen that she would take time off work, go home, and have a calm and open discussion with Sydney to ensure that they could all make the best decision together. Brenda then tried to contact the school but was unsuccessful. She left a voicemail asking for a call back and then went home. When Brenda reached her private entrance, she told her husband what had happened and went inside. Meanwhile, teachers Michelle and John received Brenda's message and called her back within the hour. At approximately 12:36 p.m., Brenda answered the phone and spoke calmly to the teachers. Everything seemed normal until Brenda started screaming into the phone, followed by a series of noises. Michelle and John, who were listening on speakerphone, were confused about what was happening but sensed that something was wrong. Michelle and John were worried about what had happened and tried calling Brenda again, but she did not answer. After several tries, a woman finally picked up at 12:40 p.m., but it wasn't Brenda. The teachers recognized Sydney's voice and asked to speak to her mother, but the call suddenly ended. This situation made Michelle and John suspicious. They decided to contact the local police to check on Brenda. Police officer Kenneth Diss, a friend of Brenda's family, heard the call and was extremely concerned about the alarming situation. He personally called Stephen to ask what was going on at their house, but Stephen could not provide any information because he was not home. After thinking for a moment, Stephen recalled that Sydney and Brenda were supposed to be at home discussing their study problems. He suspected there might have been a conflict between his wife and daughter. But he couldn't imagine the reality of the situation. Stephen then rushed home and called his daughter, Sydney, to find out what was going on. Sydney reassures him that everything is fine and the atmosphere seems calm. However, when Stephen tells her that the police are on their way, Sydney suddenly becomes hysterical. She begins to cry and reveals that a robber has broken into the house and attacked them. The call then ends abruptly. The police had already arrived at the house when Sydney dashed out, covered in blood, and screaming. She told the officers a shocking story about a robber who had broken in and attacked her mother. She said she heard glass breaking and that her mother told her to run, so she did. Sydney then hid in a courtyard, anxiously listening. She then found her mother lying in a pool of blood and she tried to help her, which is how she got blood on her. Inside the house, officers found Brenda lying face up in a room. She was badly injured, with a bloody cast iron skillet nearby and a kitchen knife on the floor. Despite the broken glass, officers began to doubt Sydney's story. Her story about a robber seemed very unbelievable. An ambulance arrived quickly and took Brenda to hospital, where she was taken to the intensive care unit. Sadly, 50-year-old Brenda Powell died shortly after arriving. Sydney was also examined by paramedics, but no serious injuries were found. She was sedated, her cuts were bandaged, and she was sent home. Forensic experts who examined Brenda's body were shocked by the brutality of the attack. She had suffered a severe blow to the back of the head, which caused her scalp to detach from her skull. Additionally, she had numerous stab wounds, estimated to be between 20 and 30, mostly concentrated on her neck. There were also multiple bruises and cuts on her arms, suggesting she had tried to defend herself. A preliminary review of the situation led police to believe that Sydney's account of events was fabricated. Although Sydney was covered in blood and had several smaller cuts on her arms, they were significantly less severe than her mother's injuries. It was evident that the robbery had been staged, as nothing was taken from the house. Sydney's actions raised several questions. After her mother told her to leave the house, why didn't she run to the neighbors for help or call 911? Instead, she waited in the yard and later went back into the house without any apparent fear. None of the neighbors reported seeing a robber. The blood found on Sydney was tested and matched her mother's, including traces on the broken glass. Police sent the knife, believed to be the murder weapon, and the frying pan for analysis. Brenda's blood was found on these items, and no fingerprints or other DNA were found at the scene. It appears that Sydney injured herself when she stabbed her mother. Sydney Powell was then taken to the police station for questioning. After the initial panic subsided, she refused to answer any questions. By this time, police investigating the attack had learned about recent events in Sydney's university life. They discovered that she had been expelled a month earlier and had lied to her family about her situation, staying with friends in hotels instead. She was so afraid of disappointing those around her that she had lied not only to her parents but also to her classmates and others. Police believe that Sydney was so afraid of telling the truth that she decided to kill her mother when her mother started to suspect something was wrong. Despite this, Sydney chose to remain silent. 19-year-old Sydney Powell was arrested and charged with murdering Brenda. She also faced charges for causing serious injury and for tampering with evidence to mislead the investigation. Due to her mental health issues, she was unable to admit or deny her guilt. Her lawyer argued that she was insane, stating that Sydney had struggled with serious mental health problems since childhood. At the time of the offense, Sydney may have been experiencing a mental health crisis that affected her perception of her actions. Sydney faced several mental health issues that may have contributed to the violent incident, which led police to request a psychiatric evaluation. During the examination, Sydney spoke about her memories of that day but could only recall bits and pieces. She remembered sitting in the basement, anxious about her parents coming home after her father found out about her struggles. She also remembers her mother coming home and their conversation starting, when her mother comforted her and asked what happened at school. She wished her mother would leave her alone. Then she heard the sound of glass breaking, and then she couldn't remember anything else about what happened. Sydney informed her doctor that she had been experiencing hallucinations since she was 11 years old. She had always been very anxious, responsible, and self-critical, setting extremely high academic standards for herself. At times her anxiety became so intense that it affected her ability to concentrate on tests, leading to multiple psychological evaluations. After extensive evaluation and discussion with Sydney, the psychiatrist diagnosed her with acute post-traumatic stress disorder, schizoaffective disorder, and depression. Sydney reported that she had recurring nightmares of her mother covered in blood. The lack of a clear motive for the murder led the psychiatrist to determine that Sydney was insane at the time of the incident. Another doctor who worked with Sydney for at least 3 to 6 months before the crime noted that her mental health had deteriorated significantly. She started losing touch with reality and began failing her exams, which ultimately led to her expulsion from university. Her condition was worsened by extreme self-criticism. She couldn't accept that she had failed. Sydney was also afraid to confess her struggles to her parents. However, the truth eventually came out, causing her immense stress. This culminated in a psychotic breakdown that resulted in her mother's murder. After her arrest, Sydney's bail was initially set at $250,000 but was later raised to $500,000. One of her relatives posted bail, allowing her to await her trial outside of custody. During this time, she received treatment for her mental health issues and felt significantly better by the time the hearings began. Sydney eventually regained her composure. After Sydney saw Brenda talking to college teachers, she knew that her mother would soon hear the truth from them. In a psychotic state, she attacked her mother. Teachers at the college heard the beginning of the attack. During the trial, her friends and relatives confirmed that they did not notice any significant changes in her behavior leading up to the crime. Although she was upset about being expelled, she was generally cheerful and sociable. The only noticeable difference was that she began sleeping more. The defense acknowledged that Sydney killed her mother but maintained that she was insane at the time. However, many experts disagreed with the psychiatrist's diagnosis. What everyone agreed on was that she suffered from borderline personality disorder, which is characterized by stubbornness, mood swings, and self-destructive behavior. In addition, signs of hallucinations were reported by Sydney to a psychiatrist when she was 11. There was no evidence in the medical records to support Sydney's claims, which undermined the defense's strategy. Several former friends mentioned that Sydney had exhibited unusual behavior even during her school years. One teacher recalled when Sydney was so nervous that she couldn't read anything on a test. However, teacher didn't realize that Sydney's anxiety could indicate mental health issues, so teacher didn't tell anyone. This type of anxiety continued into college, which may have contributed to Sydney failing her exams and eventually being expelled. While awaiting trial, Sydney lived with her grandmother and was prescribed medication to treat her mental health issues. The medication list and dosage were changed several times to find the most effective combination. Sydney's health improved significantly, and she shared any positive changes with her doctor. Her father also noticed the improvement and admitted that Sydney had a strong bond with her mother and loved her deeply. He believed that if Sydney had been in a healthy state of mind, she would never have harmed her mother. Throughout the trial, Sydney cried continuously and she expressed remorse for her actions. On September 18, 2023, the jury deliberated. Sydney Powell was found guilty on all counts. Sydney was sentenced to life in prison but will be eligible for parole after 15 years. Sydney and her attorney were unhappy with the sentence and planned to appeal the court's decision.